Hey everyone, welcome to ProgrammingMadeEasy.com. Got another Ask Me Anything. So, wonder how you guys are all doing today. So, I thought I'd start off by doing a couple of articles here. I like to kind of give a quick rundown of some of the stuff that I find that's interesting and just kind of give you guys a quick heads up on just what's going on in the industry. And you know, from time to time I'll do one of these and put them on the page so that you guys can just watch them in a bite-sized increment. I'm curious, I just kind of want to start off by asking you guys, I've done a few different concepts, a few different videos covering some different concepts and different presentation styles. And I'm really kind of curious. I want to hear your guys' feedback on any particular ones that you like, any ones that you hate, which, you know, usually always sparks some pretty interesting discussions when you hear about stuff people hate. But I really do want to hear, like, there's one particular one that I did that I've been kind of thinking of this format, and that was the one that I did on Article 11 and Article 13, which is a really, really big deal. And that particular topic is really, really hot right now. It's really, really impactful on everyone. So obviously there was a lot of attention given to that one, and it got some pretty good response. But the style and the format of it, as you guys know, is very, very different than how I typically do things. So I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. Do you like that format? Did you find it irritating? So please hit me up with that. Obviously I did also have I had a new Access video for you guys, so you guys can go check that out. We're up to lesson number 10 in Access. This last one was on group by and aggregate functions, which is obviously very important when you're dealing with SQL queries. So hopefully you guys go check that one out. But I kind of want to go over some of some other stuff right now, and just hit me up in the chat if you guys have any questions that you want me to tackle in this video, and I will certainly do that. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do, I'm going to share my screen here. So let's switch over. All right. So I am using a different computer this time to do my recordings and stuff. I've actually moved off of my laptop, and I've moved over to a full-fledged PC. So a lot of you guys know I am a full-time, full-stack instructor for WazU. And this is in no way a plug for them. I'm not really plugging for them, but I just thought I would share that information with you guys who didn't know. I'm actually on the curriculum side now. I do a lot of the development of the material that we teach over there. I do focused videos similar to the videos that I post up on YouTube, but I do mostly things like Java, C#, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, you know, React, Angular, so databases, all that material. That's all stuff that I maintain and manage over there at WazU. So if you guys are looking to get kind of a bit more of a robust understanding and go through like an actual full-fledged program, well, I help to author the material over there. In fact, I author a lot of the material. So if you guys want to check it out, it's just wazu.com with a hyphen between U. And that is Steve Wozniak's online university. So Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. Our company basically has him as our, you know, he's basically the head of the company. He's right up there as one of our partners that, you know, we're constantly consulting him on how we should do things, and we bring him in on campus all the time. And it's great, you know, when you can get pictures with him. I haven't had the opportunity because I work remotely. So when he goes to the campus there in Scottsdale, I unfortunately am very rarely ever there. But I do manage and maintain the content that is on there for Steve Wozniak's online camp there. And we do have like, we have scholarships and all sorts of good stuff. It's an actual, you know, accredited business for, you know, doing instruction and getting an education. So anyway, I wanted to start off with this article, which is actually something I wrote. I wrote it for our blog on the WazU website. Do I need a JavaScript framework, React, Angular, and Vue constraints? So one of the things that's out there is a lot of people find vanilla vanilla JavaScript very popular. A lot of people like it, and I can understand why. I mean, it's not it's a pretty decent language. It has its pitfalls. There's obviously some people who dislike it a lot. But for me, I think it's a fairly good language. At least it does what it's supposed to, and that's really the important thing. You guys know, with my Access background, I'm a real big believer in finding a tool that does what you need it to. And, detractors and people who don't like it, they're justified in their opinions of not liking something. But I think JavaScript is a perfectly fine language. But I say JavaScript is a versatile language that gives you plenty of options to manage your website functionality. But one of the central questions developers have to ask themselves is, should I use a framework like React, Angular, or Vue? So frameworks are, so in JavaScript, we have libraries, just like how in .NET we have libraries, like the .NET library gives us a bunch of pre-built code, right? It gives us functions and classes and things that work all the time, that comes as pre-written code by someone else that does all of these special things. Let me move the mic around here a little bit. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm still getting used to my new setup here. But the frameworks, or I should say the libraries, especially, there was one that was very, very popular just 10 years ago called jQuery. And it really was nice because it made some of the common functionality, some of the similar things that you do on a day-to-day basis with JavaScript, it made it just kind of easy to do. jQuery has kind of fallen out of favor in replacement for these more popular frameworks like Angular, React, and Vue. And that's primarily because I think that these frameworks provide more of a straight and narrow path that you have to follow. But it does create kind of a common streamlined process that gets you to the end result, the end goal, a little bit faster than if you tried to, well, a lot faster than if you just tried to do it with plain vanilla. It is kind of nice, though, if you work with just strict libraries like jQuery, because you can kind of go off the guardrails. You can do whatever you want with it, and you're not really confined or constrained by what the framework says you have to do. But with the framework, you do typically get development in a lot faster, and there's some nice results of that. So there are good reasons to avoid frameworks. They can often be constricting to your creativity. You must write code within the confines of what a framework determines. And if you try to go outside of those confines, you can quickly end up with a non-working application. To further complicate things, frameworks can be limited to only what the designers intend. Future innovations of the framework is not a certainty, since so many technologies come and go as developers find new ways of being productive. At any time, the framework your business runs on may change their licensing, drop support, or even become abandoned. So why use a framework at all if there are so many challenges and potential problems? Well, several reasons. The first and primary reason is productivity. Since most of the tools to build the web application are already pre-designed, the developer does not have to make them. This has not only the benefits of quicker build time, but also makes the developer less prone to error. That's right, you tend to be less prone to error if you have specific guardrails of confines of how you must construct your application. That doesn't mean you can't make problems, but it's a little bit less tempting to. Okay, so let's see, where did I stop off? It becomes the first primary reason, most of the build tools, web applications, pre-designed, the developers not have time to make them. It's not only the benefits of quicker build time, but also makes the developer less prone to error. There we go. Having these predefined components also gives a standard structure with which a team of developers will understand. And I don't think that can be emphasized enough. Having a common language or a common structure or a common framework amongst developers is very, very key to having a good, well-built application that doesn't fail over a brief period of time, to have longevity. It becomes a common language for them to speak while implementing a feature. One other aspect that should not be overlooked is the reusability of the components which are built. Frameworks tend to motivate the developer into creating their own smaller parts which are reusable. This cuts back on the development time, but also increases the thoughtfulness of the code they write. And that is a big deal to me. The thoughtfulness of code, I think, is one of the most overlooked aspects of being a good developer. Most people just have this emphasis of getting it done and don't put any thought into what they're building. And sometimes it's just plain ignorance, not bad ignorance. It's just, I don't know. So, sometimes you get people who just build because they're just trying to think things through, and they build something they don't realize becomes a monstrosity later. And it just kind of piles up one on top of another. It's a very common problem, but it's because I think there's far too much of that in our industry that has nothing to do with whether or not you know what's the right thing to do. They just do it for expediency. And sometimes that's a pressure from the outside, right? That's your boss saying, we need XYZ feature implemented by the end of the sprint. And you have to get it done, so therefore you just do whatever you have to. Maybe you skip some unit tests or something like that. And this is really a very bad practice, a bad problem, but it's rampant. It's everywhere. If you open up any bit of code, you're almost always going to find some section of it that was written by somebody who hastily needed to put some sort of feature together before the end of the sprint, and it just looks terrible. And this is also where I kind of go into things about comments. I have this argument regularly with people, and I understand the perspective of we need to have comments in our code. I get it, and there are times where I do feel that comments are definitely appropriate for code. But on the bigger picture, I think that they become a crutch. A lot of developers will write some lengthy bit of code that's a big, huge function or a big, huge class, and then they try to explain what's going on inside the class or inside the function with comments at periodic points. And that's just simply not very well thought out. It means they didn't take the time to properly name things. It means they didn't take time to properly separate things. They just kind of wanted to put everything hastily together. And I'm a culprit of this as well. I fully admit that I do this myself. I have products that are out there that I hastily put together and didn't give much thought, but I had to get the product done. And I feel bad about it every time that I look through code and see it. I'm like, oh man, that's terrible. But anyway, moving on. The last thing to address is longevity. Despite the earlier warnings in this post, the 3 primary frameworks in use today show no signs of disappearing or losing support. React is developed and curated by Facebook. Angular is a product of a cooperative effort between Google and Microsoft. And lastly, Vue has over 50 active developers that are continually working on improvements to the product. Vue has one of the more massive followings in the industry and continues to grow. If you aren't using a framework like React, Angular, or Vue to develop your front-end application, you are costing your business. Want to learn more about becoming a software developer? Click on the request info in the upper right-hand corner. Once again, I will post a link. I always do this at the end of these things. I post the link to these articles that I find so that you guys can go back and look at them yourself and read them. So I'm going to take a break there, and let's just see what kind of questions we have here. What is everybody saying on the chat? I got a message from Jassim Hamid. Hello. Well, hello. How are you doing today, Jassim? This one is from Test. It says, hi, Steve. Hope you are well. Thanks for streaming a quick, frequently asked question. I hope to ask a question and wondered if you can help. Thanks. Well, Test, that's why I'm here. Hopefully I can answer your question. I don't know if I can. I won't really know until you ask it. So let's see what we got. All right, Rodney Clutter says, hey, Steve, I have watched your videos and they have helped me very much. Well, thank you, Rodney. I appreciate you watching. And I suppose this is a good time to plug a membership. So those of you guys who don't know, I do have memberships. They're $5 a month. You guys get 10% off in my my merchandise store if you guys are interested in buying mugs and t-shirts and all sorts of good stuff. I got a towel up there that's pretty cool. I got like HTML tags on it, say head, body, and foot. I kind of like that one. Hopefully, I have some merch that is being shipped to myself. I'm going to try to start wearing some of it a little bit on the streams and stuff. But yeah, you guys should go check it out. If you just go to my main page, programmingmadeeasy.com, you guys can find a link to the Teespring from there. Also, at the bottom of all of my videos now, I think you have like the little thing that shows, you know, just before the comments that shows the merchandise that's selling. So if you guys are interested, go check it out. If you don't, well, that's no big deal to me. Okay. Hassan Debaj. Debaj? Did I say that? Please let me know if I pronounced that right. Hassan Debaj. What is the programming skill to enter the SAP world? Thanks. The SAP world. I mean, there's a lot of different languages. I would say really just start off with learning any programming language, I would say. And then like SAP, let me look up. So programming, SAP programming language. I don't know the honest answer. You know, I honestly don't know the answer of what's the best one to go through. So this is what good developers do. When they don't know the answer, they go look it up. So I'm going to do SAP programming languages. And we'll see what we got here. Yes. Tutorials point. ABAP. What are ABAP and SAP? Okay. I learned something new. ABAP. I've never even heard of that language. ABAP programming language. SAP Help Portal. Here, let me drag this over so you guys can see it. Because it doesn't really help if I just read it, right? Is a programming interface of application server ABAP and in SAP NetWeaver. A prerequisite for the use of the ABAP programming language is the installation of application server ABAP. Most of the components of an ABAP can be organized in layers: presentation, application, and database. Those are the same three layers that we build in any application. A database, some sort of way of storing your data. The application, which is what contains your business rules, or API as we typically call it, and presentation, which is the view. What do you present to the user? Three-tier client server architecture in accordance with their tasks. So basically anything. Anything is going to be built that way. Programming models, database accesses, special characteristics. So I guess ABAP sounds like the number one. I've never even heard of it. I honestly don't know. I work mostly in the web side. I do a little bit of C# stuff with like, WPF and UWP. But mostly, I work in web. I do a lot of full stack web development. So some of these more niche things I'm not quite as comfortable with or know a whole heck of a lot about. So anytime you guys ask me questions like that, it's great because now I know ABAP, right? I didn't know that before. So that's pretty cool. All right. Let's see. What do we got here? What's next? Gavda, how would you go? So Gavda asks, how would you go about automating running a update query and emailing SMTP on success failure? I learned so much from your VBA video, so thank you. Well, first of all, it depends upon what platform you're planning on using. If you're going to be using SQL Server, then you can actually do that through SQL Server Integration Services. You can have it email you, after a certain process is running. I find SQL Server Integration Services is a fantastic tool for managing data tasks like what you're asking, where you want to do some sort of update query. If you're looking for a broader answer, like if you're looking for access, like what to do with access, that's kind of more of a combination. You're going to have some sort of access database that's up and always running on some sort of server. Typically what I do is I have some sort of timer that goes off every, minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or however often you want. You just don't want to have it like run every second. You should set it to some sort of timer every 5 minutes to go check some sort of task. And then you can just simply execute the task, right? You can program your Visual Basic for Applications application to do that. And in fact, let me just bring this over so you guys can see. Let's do this. So I actually have a timer video on how to create an access timer that will trigger some sort of function after a certain amount of time. So that's on my programmingmadeeasy.com website. Maybe I can find it. Maybe. Maybe? Come on. Can't be reached. What is going on? Why can't you be reached? ProgrammingMadeEasy.com. That should be... Why is my page down? It's no bueno. That's not good. Why is my page not working? I'm going to have a conversation with somebody. That is, my registrar is not working. Interesting. Okay. That's not good news. But if you go to YouTube and then Programming Made Easy, this should take us to, yeah, there's my page. Okay, ask me anything. Hey, look, we're live. What do you know? Okay, so if we do a quick little search in here, I'm just going to click on this and we'll do, I think it was under timer. How to run, yeah, timer command in Microsoft Access, automated tasks. There you go. I'm not going to play it on here, but if you go check it out, so it's going to be this URL, this address, or if you just look it up, again, just put in timer in the little search for my main page, and you can, you can go ahead and watch this at your leisure. All right, so close that out. What else do we got for questions here? Rodney Clutter asks, I don't know if this is the proper place, but I have a question about OData connectors in Access. Is there a way to link OData in the same manner that Excel can link to it? That's a good question. I'm not really sure, honestly. Again, check it. Let's see what we got for good old DuckDuckGo search, shall we? So OData, Microsoft Access. I imagine there's probably going to be some sort of library that we can connect to. CData, ODBC drivers connect your data to any database management tool that supports open database connectivity. CData, OData. If you have not already, first specify connection properties in an open. Oh, so you could just make a DSN. That makes sense. You could just specify a DSN, an ODBC connection, and set it up as a data source. That totally makes sense. And then you just create linked tables, right, from your ODBC connection. That does make sense. Interesting. That's cool. How to connect to OData in MS Access. So you guys probably noticed I'm using DuckDuckGo. I'm not using Google. I can have a larger conversation about that if you guys want, but I am using DuckDuckGo, and I'm also using the Brave browser. I'm not using Chrome, even though it looks like Chrome. It's actually the Brave browser. With these two things combined, I find with DuckDuckGo and Brave, there's a lot of tracking stuff that is not being done, so that's good. Actually, not Noxus. There's nothing to my knowledge. Yeah, OData's good support, but yeah, I think you're just gonna have. This doesn't look like it understands. There's no out-of-box connector for OData that ships with MS Access. Requires a third-party connector. Ah, here we go. You can use the CData ODBC driver. There you go, to import data into an Access table. So there you go. Let me just go ahead and post this link. I'm going to put it in the chat. There you go. There is the link to this article right here about how to import a table into Access. Also, maybe I'll just go ahead and link this one too. Copy that link address. Follow that. There you guys go. So if you're looking to link OData into your Access database, that's what you guys can do. I figured you'd need some sort of third-party library, but it sounds like they do have an ODBC driver that you can connect with. So that's pretty good. All right, what's next? Who's got next? Rodney Clutter. My Excel link uses an Atom file, but Access can't seem to connect with it. Yeah, unfortunately. Again, you'd probably need a third-party tool for that specific task. Jassim Hamid asks, what do you think of Ionic, and what is the best app development platform in your opinion? Well, Ionic is pretty good if you're going to be working with like mobile apps. Like if you want to convert your web application to a mobile application, then Ionic is one of the ways you guys can go. We actually teach Apache with, I'm sorry, yeah, so we teach Cordova and Ionic together in order to do mobile development. I think what's the native script, though, is probably where you really want to go. That's kind of the newer thing that Angular works with. So if you're learning Angular, which most people who use Ionic are doing Angular, so but you're going to want to go over to native script. It's just kind of it's actually where the Angular team is pointing people to now. So you might want to check that out, native script. What is the best app development platform in my opinion? So app development, again, I think that web is becoming so versatile. You can build a web application that then becomes a phone app or a desktop app. Like we've got Electron, right? As Electron.js as a way of building a desktop application. In fact, Visual Studio Code is based upon Electron. So, we have a way of building basically web applications and putting them on any device, right? Becoming cross-platform. With ASP.NET Core, you can build a cross-plat application for Linux or Apple or, Windows PC. So you can definitely have just a web application can run on just about anything. And I've always been a pretty strong advocate of .NET. I love .NET, both the old library and the new .NET Core library. I love them. I'm falling a little bit behind on the 3.0 stuff. I'm going to have to check into it. I'm going to have to start doing some research on that. Most of my time lately has been preoccupied with Java and with JavaScript. So unfortunately, I haven't had as much time dealing with C# lately as I wish I had. And Access is a very, very distant, it's almost a distant memory, but I still like it so much that I'm continuing the video series for you guys because I think it's important to do. So I would say the best platform to build an application for me, I love C# as a language. I think it's the best language to learn out there. Just mostly because I think off of the C# language, once you learn C# and all of the little intricate details about C#, you start to understand how those same concepts really do flow well with other languages. They just suddenly, they all make sense. JavaScript is another good one. Like once you understand how Lambda expressions work with func of t and action of t, and how delegates work. Like once you understand that, it's really just an easy thing to work with JavaScript because they're one and the same. They have different mechanisms of making that work behind the scenes, but the language becomes more functional. C# becomes more functional once you understand func of t, action of t, delegates, Lambda expressions, link, all that good stuff. So. But when you do, it's like now moving over to JavaScript is like, oh, well, this is just, the map function is just the select function, it's stuff like that. All right. What's next? Jim Griggs asks, trying to direct my son to the best programming course for great business opportunities. Well, okay. That's actually Jim, I'm going to answer your question by talking about some of the articles that I actually had lined up for this. So I actually pulled up a bunch of articles on, what's hot in 2019? What are companies hiring for? What's the popular language to learn, et cetera, et cetera. And it's probably no surprise to anybody that C# is not really on anybody's radar. It's funny, though, because it consistently rates like in the top 5, like consistently on all these things, but then never gets mentioned in the columns. Go figure. Not this one. I want to talk about. So one thing is, if you're going to go into JavaScript, you should learn TypeScript. I don't think that there's any dispute about that at this point. If you can get along with JavaScript just by learning vanilla, plain vanilla, and doing something in like React as a language or as a framework. But if you're going to be doing anything in JavaScript, you really, really, really need to learn TypeScript. It is becoming almost the de facto standard for the JavaScript world. It's really, really taking off. So if your son is interested in web development, gonna need to learn JavaScript. It's just right now, it is a must skill to have. And then once he's comfortable with JavaScript, learning TypeScript is the next step in that. And what's great about that is TypeScript is essentially a lead up into some of the more well-established object-oriented programming languages like C#, C++, Java, even Golang and Python to a certain extent. But just learning about type safety and object-oriented development, TypeScript is kind of something that retrofits over the top of JavaScript to make it more like an object-oriented language, because JavaScript is traditionally known as a functional language, even though it deals with objects. But it's more traditionally known as a functional language. TypeScript kind of takes the JavaScript underpinnings and adds to them an object-oriented way of writing code. So, and this was really designed, I think, and I'm totally like throwing out my perception here, but it's my perception that what ended up happening was, like, the guys at Microsoft were saying, boy, this, we love writing C#, we love writing .NET code, we're trying to do JavaScript stuff, but man, it's just so hard to make that leap from this object-oriented language over to this functional language when the languages are so similar. Can we do something to kind of, bridge that gap between our object-oriented language in C# and Java that we know and move over to JavaScript without having to have this like huge learning curve? And so TypeScript was born, and TypeScript has really, really helped, I think, a lot of the object-oriented, the developers that are more object-oriented jump into the JavaScript pool and feel okay, because it just really feels very natural for us. So that would be one way to go. The other thing is, and I'm trying to find the article, not that one. So here's a TechCrunch article from a month ago. And it starts off with, here are the most in-demand programming jobs and languages according to Hired. Now take this one with a bit of a grain of salt, because the sample size is only 98,000 developers on Hired. Well, so I don't know, there might be some skewing of the statistics. I always like to go to the Stack Overflow surveys, but they haven't released the 2019 one yet. We still only have the 2018, but there's a lot of good stuff in that 2018 survey. So I would definitely go check that out. But they are saying that learning to code for blockchain's applications is the way to go. Demand for blockchain engineers and security engineers has increased the most. Companies requesting programmers with blockchain experience shot up a whopping 517% in 2018. So that's a huge, honestly though, if you had one job posting for it and now you have 5, I guess that's a good way of putting it. Like, for every one job posting they had for blockchain, now there's 5. So that's a pretty substantial growth, but it may still only mean you have 20 jobs out there. I don't know. But it does sound like, I think that it's probably much higher than that. Just sometimes the statistics that they like to make things sound a little bit bigger than they actually are. But I think that blockchain is definitely a hot buzzword right now. So companies' searches for security engineers were up 132% over the year ago. I have a really good friend who's in security, and it's definitely a big demand, especially as we're starting to hit kind of a global back and forth between, China, North Korea, Russia. All of these different actors, these state actors, are starting to try to affect the American and the UK economies by infecting businesses and breaching businesses. I know Facebook didn't officially say that anything went wrong, but there was a Facebook downage for a while. I saw YouTube had some struggles. There was another company I can't think of off the top of my head that was mentioned that also, a very popular one. I just can't remember which one it was. But they had some downtime too. So security engineers are really, really big right now. And we actually offer, and not to sound pluggish, but at Wazoo, we do actually offer a security path if you want to learn that. We have a data science and a cybersecurity course that you can take, and you can get certified in and all sorts of good stuff. Across all geographies, jobs, so the highest paying salaries are security engineers, search engineers, blockchain engineers, natural language processing engineers, machine learning engineers, and gaming engineers. Now, I think that last one is kind of interesting because I'm surprised that it's still growing for gaming engineers. I thought that this was kind of one of those things that would just be big and kind of flat, because the gaming industry, I don't know that there's much growth in gaming right now. It seems like a pretty flat level, but I could be wrong. But if there is any growth, it's probably not that much. I did start to do I tried to look at some different numbers regarding game developer postings versus like web developer postings, and it was like 1/10 of the number of postings for gamers, game developers. So I don't know. I think web development is still pretty highly coveted. I think that it's actually one of the most aggressive industries in the most desperate need of developers is just web development. So honestly, like Jim, I would say go with web development if you can get them into it. I don't think most companies are looking for web either for their web pages that they're exposing publicly or internally for their own business applications internally. You know, once you learn how to do that kind of thing, you can really move around and do just about any job. The other thing that's interesting is DevOps. So DevOps engineers, which is, you know, kind of a step above. So it's kind of like you can be a developer, you can be an admin, but then you combine those two skills together and you get DevOps, and that's a really, really high paying job. So it's kind of like you can take a junior developer, move them to mid-tier developer, then to a senior developer, then maybe even an architect, but then you have to start going into the administrative tasks. So if you start from the IT side, it's kind of, you can learn to blend things in, right? It's a blend of the IT and the software developer. Someone who's an IT specialist that knows how to do development is really going to take off. And I think DevOps is one of the highest paid positions now out there. And I have an article on that too. So let's see. So here's some graphics. So they had search engineer is $157,000 in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, you got to keep in mind San Francisco Bay Area. So this is, you know, this is Silicon Valley. This is the highest paid area. So this is probably going to be skewed by a little bit of the demographics that are there. Google is there. So, you know, of course, there's going to be a lot of search engineer jobs. Security engineer, blockchain engineer, natural language processing engineer. They're all in the $150,000. And machine learning engineer, all in the $150,000. And I get emails every day in my inbox just because I like to keep tabs on the industry for like what are some of the jobs that are out there for ZipRecruiter, right? And I get these job offers for $150,000. Well, I shouldn't say job offers. I get one of these job postings for like $150,000 all the time. And my skills that I post up are, you know, for just to kind of keep track is the Java, the C#, the JavaScript, the React, the Angular, Spring MVC, ASP.NET Core. Those are my main keywords, and those are going to be pretty ubiquitous in the industry. And I am finding that I'm just getting a ton of hits. I'm not going anywhere. I love my job. I love teaching. I love teaching because I actually learn a lot. I learn a lot about different languages simply because I'm teaching them. But there's lots of money. There's just a ton of money because the demand is so incredibly high right now. And the other thing is most of these companies that are doing a lot of the hiring are in areas where the cost of living is exceedingly high. So, you know, Seattle and San Francisco, where, you know, it's just ridiculous to try to live out there. Oh, hey, Olubayu's here. Hey, how's it going, buddy? Olubayu is one of our members. Thank you so much for signing up, Olubayu. Once again, if you are interested, you can sign up as a member. It's just $5 a month. And you get 10% off discounts in the Teespring stores where you can buy mugs, T-shirts. I've got towels. I love that towel. And I got a couple different things like, did you code today? and some pretty cool stuff. You guys can check it out. If you don't want to buy anything, I understand. I don't want to buy it. You know, I hardly ever buy anything from anybody who like panders it like I am right now. But Olubayu, since he's a member, he gets 10% off. So that's pretty cool. Also, if you are a member, you can ask me questions directly. I have a little form that you guys fill out. You can send me your questions and I respond to them. Like, you guys probably have noticed that I don't have a whole bunch of time to answer comments in the video sections or in the comment section of my videos. It's just simply, I get too many very vague questions in there, and it would require a huge back and forth, and I don't really want to get into something like that in the comment section of a video. Now, I will answer in those videos, you know, some general questions about how things work that are related to the video, but I think you guys can see just how overwhelming it gets with, hey, I've got XYZ going on in my database. How do I do this? And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You have to be more specific. So for those of you who sign up as a member, you get that kind of access to me. You guys can send me a message and I respond back and we have a back and forth. Sometimes it leads to, you know, like a one-on-one session where we chat about it and we work things out and maybe you screen share, that sort of thing. And then, of course, we have, if you do also sign up as a member, you also get your name mentioned at the end of every video that I record while you are a member. So that's pretty cool. Okay, let's see. Jim, I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, just, you know, ask me again or tell me what I missed. Okay, Adam Hannock says, how do you keep yourself motivated to learn programming? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. You know, it's interesting that this industry really has so many different divergent paths that you can take. There's a ridiculous number of languages to learn. Seems like every day there's a new JavaScript framework that's created. Luckily, that seems to have consolidated a little bit around a few, just because they have kind of a superior thing going on with them. But I think that really what it is you have to have a thirst for knowledge, period. Like, I'm a huge history buff. I love history. You know, I read about it. I talk about it. I'm interested in it. Unfortunately, it seems like all of my friends, including my wife, don't really care at all about any of it. But I'm very interested in it. I like to read some political science stuff. Like I said, history. I don't really do mathematics like I did when I was a kid. But, you know, I just have a thirst for knowledge. I have a thirst for understanding it. And I really want to understand. And I always want to get better. That's probably what it is. I think it's this underlying motivation to constantly get better. I'm not looking to compare myself against other people. It's about comparing yourself to yesterday. How are you today? Are you better than you were yesterday? And the more that I learn, the more I realize I don't know, right? And I feel like I become a more open person to different experiences, different possibilities. I find myself like, it's weird. I end up finding myself eating foods that I wouldn't typically think to eat. I have conversations with people I don't typically converse with. I'm more open to talking to people I might have previously shunned because I think my cat is causing havoc. I think that it's important for us to communicate with other people and learn from them. And that's not necessarily a perspective I always had growing up. But I think this underlying concept of just trying to better yourself constantly, that's what really keeps me motivated to learn more about programming. That's, you know, if you're not trying to make yourself better and your little world around you better, then honestly, what are you living for, right? Like, what are you trying to do as a person? There's this, and I'm going to dip a little bit into politics here for just a second, but there's kind of this push nowadays with younger generation, the millennials and Gen Z and that sort of thing, to say you could affect change in the world if you just push, right? If you just go after it, you can do it. We can do this together as a group. And I'm thinking, but they don't even know how to pay their bills. They don't know how, like, the cost of insurance on a house. They don't know how to keep their own rooms clean. what are they like? Yeah, they may have these social idealistic things, but can you really trust them with the world? Can you really trust them with our government? And then you have politicians that are saying we need to lower the voting age to 16. And I'm like, what kind of anarchy are you trying to cause with that? It doesn't make any sense to me, because they haven't really even understood what, in my opinion, the meaning of life is. And that is to make your world, your little section of the world, better. That's your job. That's why we're here on this earth, is to make things a little bit better. And that goes into, what are you doing day to day to make your life better? And for me, that's learning more things. That's becoming more open to newer experiences, new ideas. And then one of the things I love to do is talk about those things with other people and spread that knowledge, spread that wealth, right? Spread the information, because that knowledge is freedom, right? The knowledge is freedom, especially in this industry right now. The software development industry is unlike any other. You can go in and learn a skill and come out and get a highly paid beginner position, right? Like $60,000, $70,000 positions are out there. Not every one of them is that, but you know, like, what other industry can you come out through 6 months of training, or however small little bit of training you get, and then come out the other end and you're getting paid more than what you were getting at the highest position you ever had in your past life? Like, I don't know of any other industry that's like that. And even like the electrical, you know, if you're talking about plumbing or electrical, you become you're an apprentice for a while. You go through the schooling, and then you still don't get a job that pays that well right out of school, right? That's just kind of a consistent problem that we're also experiencing in colleges. Is we're not really giving the kids the skills that are in demand, and those things that are in demand are still growing in demand, yet we're still not fulfilling those needs. That's a really big, serious problem in today's world right now. But anyway, Adam, I hope that answers your question. Let me know if it didn't. You guys can always send me a message in the chat, and let me know. HRU Bricks asks, hi there. What are your thoughts on Python for a first language to learn? I'm looking at DB development, data analysis, downloading data from websites, and analyzing it. Well, HRU Bricks, I'm going to say Python is really, really good for data analysis. It's one of the main languages that usually gets taught, along with like R. And what you're talking about is data scraping, right? You're talking about scraping the web for data. And, you know, this is a pretty common skill that a lot of people have to build up. There's a lot of different frameworks or different libraries that help you do this in just about any language that you could be working with. Python definitely does seem to be a pretty hot topic right now. Personally, I'm not fond of the style of Python. I find that it leads to far too much confusion about where the scope of your functions are beginning and ending. A lot of people love the whole indented style of language, or the more verbose languages like Visual Basic and Python. I think there's a lot of similarities between Python and Visual Basic, not in like performance or anything, but just in kind of the way it reads. And I gotta say, after you learn a language like C or C++ or C# or Java, you know, or JavaScript for that matter, it suddenly, you start to look at Python and you're like, that's a really weird way to do things. Like, for some people, it's great. It's a great language to learn. But I fear that it's not as translatable to other languages, right? That's kind of the main problem, I think, with Python is, how do you translate your knowledge of Python into other languages? It's a little bit harder to leap to it. But that being said, I'm open for anybody learning a language, period. Like, I'd rather you learn pseudocode and start from there, which isn't even a programming language, right? It's just pseudocode. And then you learn the basics, you learn the main concepts. And then once you understand the main concepts, then you can jump to any language you want, like whatever the language is that fits the tool that you need for the specific problem. And this is kind of why you can suddenly become a polyglot. And that's really what most developers have turned into, is a polyglot, which basically means you know multiple languages, right? So I think that if you learn the basics of just any language, then suddenly you become, some of those concepts become translatable to other languages. So then to me, the question becomes, which language can be like my home language that then I translate everything else to? And this is a very good analogy to just regular languages, because my main language is English. I don't know very much of any other language, but I do know this. Every multilingual person has some sort of base home language that they relate the other languages back to. Like, this means this in my native language. This means this in my native language. And that's kind of what you have to do. You have to figure out what's the best base language to stick with and translate everything back into. And this is why I'm always talking about C#, because I think C# is really just the best language for doing that, because of all these other concepts that it basically encompasses. Like, C# takes all of these great ideas and says, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's include that in ours. Like, we're not going to be exclusionary. We see a good idea. Let's bring it in. And that's pretty cool. I think that that's one of the benefits of learning the C# language, is you just get that kind of ability. Okay, next question. Ceremis asks, when is Trump going to be impeached? I fully admit to this. When he was elected, and actually before he was elected, I said, if Trump gets elected, I think he's going to get impeached. And that was because he was so unpopular amongst both Republicans and Democrats that I just figured, what the heck? He's going to be impeached. They're going to find some little ticky-tack thing that is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, and everybody's going to get all up in arms, and he's not going to have any support in either party, and he's going to go. I'm surprised that he's lived as long as well, not lived. Let me rephrase that. I don't mean live as in like actually living, so please understand, I'm not talking about that. I mean, I'm surprised he's been in that office as long as he has, with all the things that he says, with all the weird things that he does and tweets. But you got to admit, I think he's probably the most entertaining president we've ever had and may ever have. And I think it's almost that very fact alone, the fact that he's so entertaining to so many people, even the people on the left that hate him. Like, why would they get rid of him? He's the best thing that's ever happened to them, because they can get ratings on news and they can bemoan him publicly and don't feel, like they have to hide their political position. And they can retweet everything that he tweets. And what's interesting? I think that there's almost a direct comparison between what Trump is doing with Twitter and the fireside chats that FDR did. Because it's like a relation to that group of people. Like, it's a way of communicating and relating to the people directly. That wasn't something that was done before, right? The advent of the radio in FDR's time allowed him to have these fireside chats where he could talk to the American people directly without any news filter, just kind of like, here it is, bluntly, this is what's going on. And that's the same thing that Trump has an advantage of doing right now. Obama had the same thing too, and that was part of his winning strategy in how he won back in 2008, was because he kind of latched onto the social media aspect, which was still an upcoming thing, but it was really tapping into the younger generation, and that's where it was kind of like this new voter base that people discounted at the time. Like, how are you going to get young people to vote? Because traditionally, young people don't really vote. It tends to be more of the older or middle-aged generation that tends to do more of the voting. So having them tie into this younger generation and get them enthused and stuff like that, that was really kind of what happened. Now, Trump being impeached, well, Russia collusion has been completely thrown off the table, right? That's gone. So what's the next thing that they can try to go after him for? He's trying to do this stuff with the border wall, which is interesting. one of the most controversial things that I think is about to come up that nobody's really talking about yet is Puerto Rico is once again trying to become the 51st state, and the Trump administration has vehemently opposed that. And I think that I don't know that that's going to be an impeachable offense, but I think that it's something that might cause him a bit of some angst during the election process. And I can see the numbers of concurrent viewers is going down now that I've started talking about politics, so I'm probably going to have to move on. But I appreciate the question, Ceremis. I really do. When is May going to resign after she lost the third time in the House? Oh, she's already said she's gonna quit. She's already said that she as soon as I think the statement was as soon as the Brexit deal is done, she is resigning, if I recall correctly. I don't think the Brexit deal is going to pass. And honestly, if I'm just being blunt and honest here, why the hell are they even trying to do a deal? I don't understand. Like, I put this to one of my other friends. I was like, so if I'm breaking up with an ex-wife, which I don't have any ex-wives, but if I'm breaking up with a wife, like, do I really want to work out a deal to leave, or do I just want to leave? Like, what if I don't have to pay alimony, and if I don't have to pay child support, why would I? It's almost like voluntary. It seems like they're trying to do this voluntary alimony with the European Union, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Now, I'm an outsider. I totally understand. I am not like deeply involved in the politics. I don't fully understand them. I don't fully grasp it, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if your population is saying, let's get out of the EU, why don't you just get out of the EU? Like, why are you trying to negotiate anything? Like, it's just, we're done. Bye. You know, if you guys want to continue to do trade deals with us, well, you're just going to have to work with us individually. I don't understand why not. Anyway, moving on. Again, still politics. Interesting. Olabayu says, so Olabayu Olasakan, I hope I pronounce your name right. Olabayu Olasakan says, I use the following VBA code to force user to agree to copyright agreement before they can log in. I use the following VBA code. Yeah, it's not a bad idea to do a copyright agreement. That is an important step to do if you're going to be making your application public. That's really good to do. Gavda says, how would you query Active Directory with Access VBA? Ergo, to extract, update user details. Thanks. Once again, you're going to have to establish, like, you're going to have to use a third-party driver. You're going to have to use a third-party library to connect to Active Directory in order to make that work. So you guys can do a search for Active Directory in VBA. Let me just pull this up here. So we'll do Microsoft Access VBA Active Directory. Connecting to Active Directory from Microsoft Access. Let's see what they got here. SQL is used for working with relational databases. Yeah, so that's kind of a quick little like check. Hey, we got a new member. Welcome, Jim Griggs. Thank you so much for signing up, sir. I really, really appreciate it, Jim. If you are interested at all in becoming a member like Jim, all you have to do is just sign up on my main page. It's just $5 a month. You get 10% off in our Teespring store for all the merchandise I sell there. If you guys have an idea of like something you want me to put up there, like a design or a logo or something, let me know. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say. Also, you get direct access to me. You guys can fill out a little form that I've got that, you know, you can just ask your question and I respond back to you guys. Also, you get a mention in every one of the videos that I record for that period of time that you are a member. You're going to get a mention at the end of the video. So, all right. Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate you signing up, buddy. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So going back to, so this is kind of an interesting way. You could use SQL Server. Perhaps not as directly, like you can like store information that you're looking for through SQL Server. You can also use like stored procedures and functions and stuff like that you could probably go through and do that. But, so you could use LDAP queries. right? That's one way to go through. VBScript is okay. That's not quite the same thing. VBScript is a language that you can run essentially through what? Well, that's interesting. So VBScript is actually like VBA and VBScript are like twinsies. If you know how to do VBA, you can write a lot of VBScript, which again, by the way, going back to the DevOps thing, VBScript is a DevOps tool. So this is like something that you can do a lot of really cool stuff with. If you know VBA, you can do VBScript. So yeah, so you can query Active Directory using VBScript, which is pretty cool. Let me see here. I'm looking for, I think you're looking for more of a direct connection though, right? You're looking for more, so they got an ODBC for Active Directory. Yeah, you can run some PowerShell. Like you could run you just do a run command of PowerShell, I suppose. You could also, there's a third-party library. I think you can plug in a PowerShell. Let's see. Again, guys, my Access is a little rusty. I gotta be honest. Like I'm really not totally caught up on all the nifty things that they do in Visual Basic for applications and Access, as I wish I was. And I know a lot of you guys come to my channel because of that. It's where a lot of people get into, and come find my channel. But honestly, like I haven't really written anything in Access in like probably 5 years, like built an application. I've done some small things, some small little things, because I know that I can get at data easy and make reports and query stuff. I wrote an Access application for WazU that was taking like student information and giving a nice little dashboard for all our mentors and instructors. And that was pretty cool. But, I ran into a lot of the similar, like, how do you upgrade versions? How do you make changes? How do you disperse the new changes? And when there's a change to the format of the data, you got to go in and make changes that way. It would have just been better probably overall. And I was just assuming that our development team was going to do this, but to just build it, and they actually have since then, but build a dashboard that talks to the APIs, right? The stuff that actually does the data and exposes an API endpoint for each one of the user, for each one of the points of data in your database. It's better to just plug into those APIs rather than trying to query the data through the database itself. So anyway, I really am not, some of these questions are really good, and I'm kind of like, how do you connect Active Directory to Access and VBA? I've never had to do that before, but I know it can be done, and I would imagine it's almost always the answer of some sort of third-party or ODBC driver. Like that's pretty much the way it happens. Access is great in that way, in that it can pull data from just about any source through ODBC. So if you're thinking about trying to pull data from some sort of source, chances are the answer is almost always going to be some sort of ODBC driver, right? If you're trying to do something fancy that's going to connect to some sort of other application or other endpoint, then almost always that's going to be some sort of third-party library. That's just kind of the way it works. So Active Directory, or LDAP, is really kind of one of those. It could be either or, but it seems like if you just do a search for Active Directory and Access VBA, you're going to find a lot of different answers, but I think it's probably going to be an ODBC connection. Let's try one more here, just to see if we get anything. Tested on Windows 8, ADODB command, connection and command, ADS DSO object, Active Directory provider. So there you go. Wow. You just do an ADODB command. Interesting. You'll have to learn a lot about LDAP though. Like there's some in-depth stuff there that you're going to have to figure out in order to go get that data. But if you're really familiar with LDAP and the different commands that you can do with it, then it looks like you just open up a ADODB command, ADODB connection. That's interesting. I did not know that. Learn something new every day. Wow. Good stuff. Okay. Olabayu Olasakin says, hello, Steve. I use the following VBA code to force user to agree to copyright. Oh, so you just copied that one. Maybe you just posted it twice on accident. But yeah, Olabayu, that's a really good idea. Having your users sign an agreement just kind of covers your butt, right? Especially if we're going to make it publicly available. Jim Griggs asks, how about Houston? I assume, can you clarify what, you probably asked that while I was talking about something, and I'm not really sure. Oh, I bet that has to do with, where'd it go? So, here's around the globe. Go. So I was going to talk about that. Yeah. Blockchain. Only 12% of the programmers surveyed on Hired Platform said they were most interested in learning about the technology of blockchain. So blockchain is one of those things that's like in high demand, but nobody really wants to learn it. So if you can learn blockchain, that's good. Candidates who know the programming language Go are the most in demand. And that was kind of what I wanted to get to, was Go is one, or Golang. You may hear of it, Golang. If you try to search it up as Go, you may not get anywhere. So do it as Golang. So what you're going to want to do is, Golang is a really good place to go. It's a good language. It's a bit kind of, it's not like Python. I mean, it has some similarities to Python. It's a pretty simple language to learn, and it's really becoming highly, Go is one of those slimmed down languages. Like there's not a lot, like you have to do things a bit more bare bones with it. There's not a lot of libraries to work with on it. But I know a lot of people are really like Go as a language to learn. So it's interesting to me that it's in demand, because it's just kind of a niche language, honestly. But it is also one of those languages that I think is, again, related to DevOps, right? And getting to your question, Jim, regarding DevOps, because you said DevOps, ? DevOps is this merger of IT, learning, doing things in the networking domain. So like if you're working on some sort of domain, like your office domain, your business domain, having automated tasks that run regularly. Like let's just say I wanted to have some sort of function that goes to an FTP server, downloads a file, sticks it into onto this folder, and then runs some sort of SQL query. Or if another good example is, what if I have a brand new employee signing up with the company? I want to be able to just enter in their basic information, get them all of the accounts that they need across all the different platforms that they need access to. So maybe that's SharePoint, it's Active Directory, it's the SQL server, it's the platform that our business runs off of, and that may be 2 of them. They may need access to Salesforce, like all these different interfaces that new employee is going to need to have access to. There's like an automated process to do that, and that's through things like Bash or PowerShell or VB script in some cases. And that's kind of what DevOps does, is it's a developer, like somebody who understands the operations side of maintaining a network and a domain, and you have some sort of programming language, and it could be just about anything, but typically it's some sort of scripting like Bash or PowerShell that does all of these different tasks, right? You could actually write up your own application, like a C# application, to go out and do all of these things, but it's going to be a little bit harder in some cases, because you're having to do more domain-oriented things. Like we're just talking about Active Directory. Like how do you tie into Active Directory? Well, it's a lot easier to tie into Active Directory if you're doing PowerShell or Command Prompt or Bash than it is if you're trying to build a VBA application, okay? It's just kind of a different genre of language. But that's kind of what DevOps is. They're developers, but they also work on the operations side of a company. Okay. Adam says, thank you very much. That was helpful. You're welcome, Adam. Anytime, buddy. Learn says, hi, I am fan of you and your channel. Kindly, can you make video for DB design, relationship instances, stuff like that, in depth and advanced? I can. I typically orient myself towards the basics and teaching like general concepts, so that you can take those general concepts and apply them to your specific situation. Because what I typically find is that most people who are asking questions like this are really looking for a very specific answer. And without knowing the specifics of what you're trying to do, it's kind of hard to answer, right? It's kind of hard for me to come up with an answer for you. Okay, so Will Bayou says, my question is, how can I make the code to work once or every 10th login? Are you talking about, I think you're talking about the copyright agreement. So you can make it so that you can have like a login counter, right? Count how many times that somebody's logged in, and just kind of keep a running tab of that, and then just have like a, if you only want to do it the one time, then you just make it like a Boolean switch on their user account. Now, if it's something that you're dispersing this database and you don't have any sort of back end that is maintaining this data, then you're going to want to, you can just store that in a local table, right? You can store it in a local table. I typically build in an Access database, I have a local table that is like my settings for the application. Just a settings app, right? Just a settings table that has like nothing to do with any business-oriented tasks. It's just like for me keeping track of things like what kind of theme do they want? Maybe how many times they've logged in? Have they signed the user agreement? You know, what is there? Sometimes I'll put in like, one of the great things I love to do is take the connection information and store it in a local table. And then I can reference that information anytime I make a connection to a database on the back end, right? So that way I can kind of maintain this thing where they enter in that information, and, you know, they enter it in one time, but they can actually switch back and forth. So I had like this development tool that I would be able to switch back and forth while I was doing development. I could just click a button and it would switch to the other database when I was working in the development side. And then when I was ready for release, I just clicked a little check mark, and basically everything in the application would be in production mode at that point. So I had like this developer, this production, and I could have different connection strings for the SQL server. I could have different error messages that would pop up based upon whether they were in production or development. Stuff like that I would store in this local table as this user settings. And that's one of the things that you could do is you could say, did they sign a copyright agreement? And you have a little local table that you're just kind of keeping a check mark of, right? You just check it up. Yep, they agreed to it. So that's typically what I would do. Let's see. Jim Grid subs, jobs, got it. Okay, I am all caught up on all of the questions that you guys have asked. So I thought I would go ahead and just take a little bit of time here. So we talked about, I'd like to finish off this TechCrunch article. So only 7% of developers said they primarily work with Go and Golang, but Go is becoming an in-demand language. So if you're looking at a language to learn, Go is an interesting one. Again, I think that there's some, take it with a grain of salt, because again, this was coming from like the San Francisco area. In San Francisco, obviously they have a lot of Google stuff going on there in the San Francisco, Silicon Valley area. So Golang is obviously going to be, since it was created by Go, it's going to be one of they're going to be asking for it. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Golang is really where you want to go. But other languages like Scala, Ruby, TypeScript, there's TypeScript again. Kotlin is kind of like a Java, another Java version, like another Java language. But by employers, but have lower penetration rates among the developer community. Globally, Go is the most popular programming language that employers are looking for, while in San Francisco and Toronto, there's higher demand for TypeScript experience. So I wanted to bring that up again. TypeScript, like, it's just becoming a thing where you're going to want to get into TypeScript, right? If you're going to be learning JavaScript, you really, really need to know TypeScript. Okay, so Jim, I see your question about jobs in the Houston businesses. So one of the things that I like to do is you can go to Indeed. Indeed is a pretty good place to go for checking out jobs. And there's Texas, right? So what I will typically do is I will try to think of some of the more common languages and just kind of see what the typical jobs are in that area. I think you're looking for, you're looking for Houston. So let's switch this over to Houston. Okay, and let's look up some of them. Why not? Let's start off with JavaScript. Okay, so this is just going to give us, oops, Oh, it did it for me. Okay. So this is a full stack developer software is $65,000 to $70,000 a year. Needs to be familiar with JavaScript, so Node.js, NPM, and Yarn. So these are basic back-end frameworks. So Node.js is a back-end runtime. It's actually not really a runtime. Well, it is a runtime, but we actually call it a now all of a sudden my brain is forgetting the term. It's a REPL. There we go. REPL. So it read, evaluate, print loop. And it's basically like taking the JavaScript that you write and it's just going through it. Oh, I lost everybody here for about 10 minutes. Interesting. My statistics on this look pretty bad. Anyway, so full stack developer, if you're going to learn JavaScript, it's funny, you can learn JavaScript and actually build like an entire application from top to bottom because of Node. Your back-end programming language, typically I do back-end in C# or Java, just because I feel that they're a little better to work with, because they typically work with like an MVC structure and I can do more architecture things with it. But Node.js is just fine. You can build a Node.js, and it's very, very popular right now because then you only need to learn JavaScript, and then you can program your front end and your back end. And then you can also work with a NoSQL database like MongoDB, and you're only working with JavaScript. Like MongoDB interface, you're working with the JavaScript shell. So, and you can actually do that with MySQL too. If you want to talk to a MySQL database, you can do it with a JavaScript shell. So you can learn JavaScript to run your database, to run your back end, and to run your front end. So that's kind of cool, right? That's one of the nice things I think about the JavaScript language is that it has this robustness. And I don't think that there's any other language really, unless you're going to be building like for a web application, JavaScript's the only one that does that, right? Although with the advent of WebAssembly, more languages are going to be able to build front-end applications too, on the web that don't require JavaScript, but that's still an upcoming technology. It's not quite fully matured yet. I always like to point out that, Microsoft has a great project they call Blazor, which is trying to do C# on the front end, which is pretty cool. But anyway, okay, so let's move on. So $25 an hour for a web development instructor. Interesting. That's for being an instructor, $25 an hour. That's pretty low, honestly. Data analyst, front end developer. Let me fix JavaScript. I want to make sure let's do JavaScript developer. No, I don't care. All right, software engineer, Snapstream Media, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We are currently looking for a full-time developer. So anyway, there's 290 jobs in the Houston area that have JavaScript developer in there. Let's just get rid of developer and see what we get with just JavaScript. Come on. I don't think that, so 403. So about 403 jobs that involve JavaScript. Now let's try C#. 432 jobs with C#. So just about as many C# jobs as JavaScript. Now, watch this. Java, just Java. Not JavaScript, just Java. It's a bit of a problem here because it does try to also do JavaScript, but let's try doing Java developer. I don't know if that's it's probably gonna skew the results a little bit. 246 jobs under Java developer. Let's see if we just do Java with a space. Or I can do minus JavaScript. Although sometimes that's going to be excluding certain Javas. So now here you go. VP of Software Engineering. Vice President of Software Engineering, $200,000 a year. That's pretty good. Needs C++, Java, or Net architecture in our business. So, okay. There's your ABAP developer. Somebody was asking about how to get into SAP. There you go. Senior manager, software engineering, systems administrator, Android developer. I don't think this is really getting us the results that we're looking for. Software developer intern, Senior software engineer, full stack, cloud software. This is about more what you can expect as a developer, is the $60, $70 an hour range. That's much more common. That one job that was looking to do instruction at $25 an hour, that's just, are you kidding me? Wow. Okay, let's just do Java with a space. 550 jobs. Java OpenGL developer. There you go. $70,000 to $110,000 a year. MVC.NET Core. So this one's that senior software developer for AIG. Another AIG job with Java experience. AIG. Boy, there's a lot of AIG stuff in Houston, huh? Minimum 5 to 7 years experience building and supporting enterprise web applications using Java EE technologies. But overall, 550 Java jobs in the Houston area. Java is by far and away, I think, the most popular language right now as far as what companies are looking for. Yeah. So Java is a good one. Let's see. Let's do Golang, just for the heck of it. There are 6 jobs. But you can see DevOps engineer, right? Doing Golang. So Golang is one of those languages that is very popular for DevOps stuff. You could be an intern for $20 an hour. That's probably a little bit, that's not bad, right? $20 an hour as an intern, right? You're not even graduated yet. You're just an intern and you get paid $20 an hour. That's pretty good. Although in Houston, I don't know what your guys' in Houston area, I don't know what your cost of living typically is, but still seems to me that $20 an hour is a pretty good starting wage for an intern. Okay, let's see. So what else can we do? What else can we look up? So we looked up JavaScript, we looked up C#, we looked up Java. Let's take a look at Python, right? Let's see what we got for Python jobs in Houston. 575 jobs. Wow. Spacecraft engineering. That's pretty good. Firmware developer, C and C++. There's going to be a lot of that combination of, if you're going to be a Python developer, they like to have C or C++ background as well. In fact, let's do that. Let's take a look at C++. So, but that's a pretty good number, right? 575. That's about as much as what we had for Java. It's about the same. C++. 325 jobs. So, and that's honestly, like, when you're talking about C++ or C, not C#, but C++ or C, you're talking about more engineering jobs. I typically categorize software development into 2 kind of camps. One who I believe is a software engineer. We typically generalize the term to be anybody who develops software, right? But in my opinion, a software engineer is someone who is basically much closer to the bare metal of the computer, writing in C++ or C, and making like the lower level platforms with which our higher level languages work. So like if you looked into what the .NET runtime runs on, it's C and C++. If you look at what Java runs on, it's C and C++. If you look at Linux kernel, that's C and C++. If you're looking at what Windows 10 works on, it's C and C++. Like, that's engineering, right? The lower level operating system level type stuff, that's engineering. To me, like, most of the development nowadays, most of the development jobs are not really oriented towards the engineering. They're really towards software developers. And so software engineering to me is that lower level. Software developers are the people who are building the applications that are used by your average user on a day-to-day basis, like trying to build something for an actual client. Not necessarily the bare bones working with the hardware, but rather something that is more or less user-facing, right? Something that they're trying to work with. But it could also be business rules, right? We have a lot of really great tools with some of these languages to handle business rules. Working with databases, doing mathematical calculations might be a nice low-level thing, but most people are looking for, hey, I just want a console that I can put this in. Like, I want to just do beep, boop, boop, and get an answer. Okay, best language for legal apps. Whew. Best language for legal applications. So when you say legal, are you talking about like a lawyer trying to build like PDF files? Or like maintaining case files? In that case, then you're going to want a more higher level language. I'd say like, C# or Java again. You could do something in like Kotlin or Python if you really wanted to, but that might be a little bit harder to do. I'd say, if you're going to go with Python, you're going to have to go with like Django, but that's going to build you a web app. Yeah, I mean, it depends. What exactly, like, more specific of a use case there is what I need from you, Jim. Like, what kind of legal application? Is this something, if we're talking about legal app, we could also be talking about something more security-oriented, like working with government or, Homeland Security. So, I don't know. If you could just give me a little bit more clarification on what you mean for best language for legal app. I suppose it really just depends upon what kind of application you want to build. And any tool is really defined by what its purpose is. And that's, I'm a big proponent of Access for a lot of purposes. Access is great for data aggregation and doing simple little user interface stuff like data entry, running reports, and, querying multiple sources of data at once. That's what Access's bread and butter is. New case-specific app. So, okay, so you're talking about like a law firm trying to keep track of cases. I've actually built an Access database to manage case information, but you do have to be careful about the security of that. Mass tort litigation. Okay. So tort litigation. I'd say I like... I'm going to go with something like Java, Java or C#. If you already know Access, Access is great, but you do start to have some security concerns because obviously client confidentiality is monumentally important. So you're probably going to need to find something a bit more robust in the security area. So I would say something like Java. Java is probably the most hardened language you could go with security-wise. There's obviously always going to be security issues with just about any language and any platform, but I think that it's probably a good route to go if you're going to learn a language. Java's good. Now, I keep talking about C# because I love C#, and it's funny enough because C# and Java are really, really similar. They're almost identical. There's a few small differences, but they work almost the same. So if you wanted to learn C# and then move on to Java or vice versa, you could do that. But if you're planning on building an application for like tort reform litigation, like you're saying, managing new cases and stuff, I'd say Java is a pretty good route to go. Once again, you could do just about anything. Like if you're looking for a language that you can do anything in, JavaScript is the language to do that. Because JavaScript gives you a lot of different ways to build something on any platform. You can build a web application, you can build a phone application, you can build a desktop application. You can do all of these things in JavaScript, and you don't need to learn any other language. But I do think that learning Java or C# is a fantastic thing to do because then you can expand into other languages. Mohammed Farhat says, I need your opinion about it for programmer used VBA for 19 years. Can you be more specific? I'm not really sure what you're asking. You want my opinion on something for VBA for 19 years? Good for you, by the way. Like 19 years of being a VBA developer. That's pretty good. I've been one for about 7-8 years. I have to think about that one. I think probably about 8 years. And it's a good language to learn. My very first language, by the way, for those of you who don't know, was actually JavaScript. was my very first one. I learned back in 95 when it came out. I still have a binder somewhere. I don't know if I have it. It's probably in my storage right now, but I got a big, thick blue binder about like that big of the Java spec in 95 and a bunch of tutorials on how it works and stuff. And that's what I learned back in 95. Then I went on from there and I used this very little, I don't know if some of you guys might know it. If you've ever heard of the IRC, Internet Relay Chat, I learned how to program some scripts in this little application called MIRC, which was the #1, probably still is the #1 client for chatting in IRC. And I learned how to script in that. I wrote some very popular scripts there. One was a channel protection scheme that was pretty intricate, pretty detailed, probably the most robust one out there for managing a channel. Had flood protection and desync protection and all sorts of great stuff in there. So that was something that I was doing back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then I kind of still kept up with JavaScript a little bit. It still wasn't really the language that it is now until like the mid 2000s. Then it started to, especially with the advent of Ajax. So JavaScript has this ability where you can have your web browser essentially act like a client and connect to some sort of backend API, can do web calls on the backend, and the user doesn't know it. Like the user's not really doesn't know that there's this communication going on with a backend server. That was really, I think, the leap that brought JavaScript into the front of the pack, and it's just been growing more and more every day. Hamid Farhat says Python. Oh, speak about migrations to Python. Okay, so if you are a VBA developer and you're moving to Python, it's not that difficult, I think. Mostly because we're already used to the more verbose language, right? You're using words for everything to begin and end what we call scope. So just about every language nowadays has some sort of scope, unless you're talking about specifically a functional language, which I think even then they still talk about scope. I'm not too familiar with some of the other functional languages. But so if you are learning Python, you can just basically understand it's a lot like VBA, but instead of, you know how we put indentation in a lot of the stuff that we do in VBA so that we can understand how it lines up in the scope? Well, that's a requirement in Python. If you don't do that, your script won't run properly, right? So it's a matter of indentation. That's really kind of what it is. And we already pretty much do this in all the other languages, but it's not a requirement in the other languages. It's just a helpful thing for readability. But they were able to take what was really just a readability requirement for us that wasn't a genuine actual requirement of our coding languages, and they made it a requirement. That's how the language knows where the beginning and the end of an if statement or of a function begins and ends. But there's a lot of similarity, I think, between Python and VB, Visual Basic, because it's so expressive. It uses more verbose words to indicate when things start and end and exactly what this thing is and what it's doing. So, okay. Next question. Chris Serrano says, best language for creating an instrument index for petrochemical applications. So Chris says, best language for creating an instrument index for petrochemical applications. Well, that's very data intensive, right? So, and you're really just trying to keep track of inventory. You could do that in, again, Access. I love Access. If you've gone to like an Excel spreadsheet, you could probably even do it in an Excel spreadsheet, but you're just going to hate life in the end if you do, because it's just going to blow up. Access is really good about this. I think if you're really planning on going something, it depends upon what your use cases are. And whenever I hear this question about what language is best for XYZ application, it's really about what is the specific purpose that you have for it. If it's going to be something that, and part of this is resources. So one of the big pushes and one of the reasons why I typically tell clients you need to go web is because it's so easy to maintain and manage and get everywhere. If I build a web application that runs on a server, then that means that every single person who needs access to that application can just pull up the page and they get the latest version on the spot. I don't have to distribute anything to them. They've already got the browser that's going to act as the client to come talk to my website. So I don't really need to do anything as far as disseminating that client version to them. And then whenever I make a change, it's just instantaneous. I can just put the new version up on the web server, maybe recycle the web server, but then once it's done, my new version is in place and I don't have to distribute this new version to anyone at all. It's just done, right? I don't have to worry about it. So that's why I typically like to point people towards web as a solution, is because it works both internally and externally. Most people think of web applications and they think of internet, right? They think of, I have a website and I want people to buy products from it or know about my company through accessing it. But web applications do much, much more than that. And you can build an intranet website, something that's an internal application that just manages your internal day-to-day business. And that's perfectly fine to do with a web application. And again, its maintainability and ease of deployment is one of the hallmarks of why you should go to a web application. If you try to build some sort of desktop application, then you have a ton of other concerns you have to worry about. And namely, how do I get this new updated modified version of the client to everyone in my company? And you could certainly send out an email with the new version, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to get it. Jane is out on vacation, and Sam didn't have the email up at the time. And you need to push these versions out quickly because you might have some pretty important business logic in there from a new requirement of the company, a new requirement of the business, and it's not in there until everybody has it, and that's a pretty big problem. So typically, I would point to web for a lot of things if the business need is that you have multiple people that need to use it simultaneously. If you have just one person who's an engineer that needs to track inventory, then by all means, an Access application or some small little application that just does nothing but track data and inventory, even an Excel spreadsheet, is perfectly fine, right? It's perfectly good. But if you're planning on expanding that out beyond just the one or two people that are going to be tracking that inventory, and you need every time somebody's going to check out some equipment, they need to register it, right? And say, I have this thing. Well, then, a web page, an internal web application is a good thing to do, because then you can expand out what it does. And who's using it, and receive the updates right away. So, is it possible to install Django offline? I mean, you can run any server. You can run any server service locally on your computer. So absolutely, you can. There's no reason you can't. Most people, if you're just going to build something for a Python application, you could just do Python app. You don't really necessarily need Django. Django is typically going to be something, it's a framework that you want to use for building a web application. But yeah, you could certainly install Django offline and run it. I don't see why not. So Mohammed asks, what is your suggestion as a programming language migration from VBA? Well, thank you for the question, Mohammed. I would say, and I iterate this all the time, my favorite language for suggesting to anyone as a language to learn is C#. And I say this because there are so many other languages that are very similar in one way, shape, or another to C#. It's like if you learn C#, it's like a great stepping stone to go to some other language even after that, because you have to really think about a career path with programming. You can learn any language. Like you can learn Python, you can learn Kotlin, you can learn Java, you can learn C#, you can learn C++, you can learn JavaScript. You can learn all these different languages, Visual Basic for, VB.net. You can learn all of these different languages, and you can gain some sort of understanding of underlying concepts. But then the question becomes, okay, what comes after even that, right? And honestly, once you make the transition to a language, when you are trying to transition to a language, which language is going to give you the best stepping stone for your career? And this is why I'm always pushing C#, is because I think that it is that home-based language. It is for me anyway, right? Whenever I'm trying to go learn some other language, I always think about, oh, yeah, that's just like this in C#. Oh, yeah, that's just like this in C#, right? It's like my home language, even though it wasn't my first language, right? C# was not my first language. It wasn't even my second language. It wasn't even my third language, okay? It was a language I learned much later on, but now anytime I try to go look at something, even something in VBA, which I learned before C#, I'm still like, oh yeah, that thing in VBA is like this in C#. It's just my nice, comfortable home. It's a nice, warm blanket, right? I've had this conversation with people at Microsoft, actually. Like, it's this nice, like, easy to understand, has everything in it. There's no complications to it. It just does what it's supposed to. Anything you want to do is there, and you can construct your application in any way that makes sense to you, and it's got all these great tools, and you can build anything with it. Like, why wouldn't you learn that as some sort of like core, like your core knowledge, your home language, and then learn from, go to other languages beyond that. And in the same way, again, as you would learn if you were a polyglot learning like different languages like Spanish or Italian or English or Chinese, or Russian, right? There's like certain languages that you just translate everything else through. And that's what C# is for me, and what I find that most people who learn it end up doing. They just like, there's occasionally somebody might say Java is like their core language, which makes sense because it's very, very similar to C#. Like they're like 95% the same thing. So it's kind of like Java or C# can work the same way. I like C# a little bit better syntax, I think, and some of the things, like very simple thing. Using the word extends in Java is really just a colon in C#. Like it's just a little colon in C#, but instead of the whole extends word. So, okay. We're coming up to 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to give it about another 15 minutes here. I'm going to end the stream at 7:15. So if you guys have any additional questions that you want to ask me, go ahead and post those in the chat. This is probably a good time to take a quick little break and remind you guys that if you are interested in becoming a member, it's just $5 a month. You guys get access to me directly. You guys can ask me questions through my special forum. And this can be about more specific things that are going on with your database or things that you're having trouble with. You can ask me those questions, and I communicate with you directly on those because you send me your email, and I can reply back. Also, you get a mention at the end of every recorded video that I do during that time. Your name will be displayed prominently, and I will mention it in the end of every video that I record. So thank you so much for those of you who have signed up. Also, another thing, don't forget, if you also sign up as a member, you get 10% off in my Teespring store. And, I've got some products there. I'm really interested in hearing what you guys have to say about those products. I don't know, it's kind of a new thing for me. I'm not really... I'm trying to burgeon out into other areas and find other sources of revenue, just because it's kind of like one of the things that you're supposed to do when you're doing this kind of work. So if you're interested in like, if you have an idea, if you have a concept, if you want to make up some art for me, if you're one of those kind of people that loves to do artwork, I would love to have you guys come up with a design concept, and that would be awesome. Maybe make some videos on some design artwork, maybe feature it on one of these live streams or something. That would be awesome. But yeah, if you guys want to sign up for, again, $5 a month, you get 10% off the store. So right away, if you buy like one or two things, it already pays for itself, right? And then if you want to go to, if you want to ask me questions, you guys have a form that you can fill out. You get your name mentioned. And also, don't forget, I have like these special behind the scenes Q&A sessions with just my members. Only my members can ask me questions. I do the live stream still, but if you have a question that you want to ask me during that live stream, you have to be a member to ask. So I do that from time to time, and that's only if you're a member. So thank you, Jim, again, by the way. Jim, thank you so much for signing up. I really appreciate you doing that. I hope it's beneficial for you. If you have a suggestion on something you want as a member, something that I'm not offering right now, but you would love to have as a member, I would love to hear what it is. So please definitely send me that info. Okay, more questions. Good. So I have Phil Drew, who says, using mail merge, MS Word cannot see parameter queries or function queries in Access using the default OLEDB. MS Word has no problem seeing simple queries or tables. What's up? Are you using the bookmarks? Phil, did you go through my little, like how to fill out a Word document? I would work from the Access side to create and generate your Word documents, not the other way around. I wouldn't do a Microsoft Word application to go talk to a database. Just simply because it's not really, though it has some tools to do it, it's not fully equipped to work with data queries. So I would just suggest that you do that. By the way, Phil, let me do this for you. I have that Word bookmark video. Let me try grammingmeadeasy.com. Come on, website. You should be up. I've got to talk to my tech guys. Why is my page not working? This is not good. Why is that not working? I paid my dues. My page should be up right now. Something is wrong with my registrar. Okay, we'll do youtube.com/programming made easy. And we'll do a quick little search. By the way, you guys should know about this. Like, if you're looking for a particular topic, you can just click on this little magnifying glass from my main page and just type in your keyword here, and this will find all the videos that are related to it. So if you're looking, so we're looking for Word, right? How to export data to Microsoft Word from Access 2013. How about that? There's a video. I will go ahead and send you the link here. I'll just post this up in the chat if you want to copy it and go watch this. There you go. That is going to give you a video just kind of on how you can use bookmarks in Microsoft Word to generate a Word document that takes table data and inserts it into the Word document. And I think that's probably right up the alley of what you're looking for. If it's not, let me know. Okay, send me a message. Okay, question from the H. Do you have any recommendations on the best method of learning a language? Ooh, very good question. Very, very good question. So, the first thing that you need to understand is any programming language is really about moving data around, okay? Sometimes that data is just meant to be within the application. Sometimes that data is meant to be learned outside, stored outside of the application, okay? But ultimately, pretty much every application in some way, shape, or form is working with data, either moving data over to this hardware device or moving it to a database or displaying something to the user and then asking for input. So understand like variables, understand how variables are these little containers that let you store data. Then you need to understand functions and how you can define a block of code that is a set of instructions that you want your application to execute. Then what are those instructions going to be? Well, those are going to be things like if statements and else statements and select or case statements or switch case statements. They're going to be, there's really only a few things. There's like loops, there's if else statements, there's so what we call control flow questions, right? What is the path of code execution that should be taken place based upon some input by the user, or possibly pre-programmed as like some sort of automated service? It's still going to be some set of steps, some set of instructions that you're telling your computer to do. And those are going to have some sort of control to them. You need to figure out, like, under this circumstance, do this, and under this circumstance, do that. And that's where things start to take shape as far as the logic, the business rules of what you want to do. And then there's some really nifty tools to make that a little bit more expanded upon, right? Like, I can do while loops, I can do for loops, I can do for each loops, I can do these different constructs with working with things like lists and arrays, so these lists and arrays are basically a more complex data structure than a typical variable, right? Typical variable contains just one single piece of data. An array or a list is going to contain multiple pieces of information in one variable. That's essentially what they are. So how do you work with data structures that are a little bit different? Okay, now once you start understanding about data structures and how you can work with them with this control flow, then you can start thinking about things in object-oriented languages. You can start thinking about classes and how we construct objects based around these classes. You can start to think about so a class is essentially a definition of some sort of object that we would typically find. Like, just conceptualize a thing, and that's a class. What the thing can do is a function. What the thing is a property, right? So, like, I love just giving the example of a car, right? A car is a thing, therefore that should be an object. It's a class. We define a class. A class is like a cookie cutter thing, a cutout of what a car is supposed to be, right? A class is going to figure out, hey, these are the things that make up a car. Like, these are the characteristics, the properties, the methods, the things that this does, and the things that it has, the state of that car. So now that you have a concept of a car, right? So you're going to define a class that is a car. Now you have to start thinking about, what can the car do? Well, the car can brake, it can go, it can turn left, it can turn right. Like, those are the four basic things that a car can do. There might be some other things too that you might want to throw in there, but those are the four things that it can do. Those are verbs, right? Those are actions. Those are actual things that it's doing. And those are the methods that go on an object, right? But then there's also what we call state or properties of the object. Like, what's the color of the car? How many tires are on it? Some cars have more than 4. Some have only 3. Some of them have 6, right? Then you have to start asking, okay, automatic transmission or manual transmission? Does it have a sunroof? Like, these are all like properties of the car, right? They're not things that it does. These are things that help to describe it. They're adjectives of it, right? So typically when we're thinking about object-oriented programming, we're talking about objects that have properties, which are adjectives, and verbs that are things that it does, which are methods, right? Methods that say what kind of behavior that thing can do, and we kind of typically form that in a verb, right? So things that it can do, properties that it has, and this is an object. Once you understand that, now things get even crazier, because then you have things like inheritance and polymorphism and encapsulation and abstraction and interfaces and generics. Like, it keeps growing and growing and growing, but at least that's kind of getting you started, right? That's the basic thing, and we just keep adding more and more tools to deal with more complex scenarios. That's all that it is. We have very basic programming that is control flow and variables with functions. And we go beyond that. Like, everything outside of that is just about adding extra tools to make the programming process easier to work with and manage. So hopefully that answers your question. If it didn't, again, drop me a message and let me know. Thank you for your suggestion. Do you have any? Okay, so Mohammed Faret says, thank you for your suggestion. You're welcome, Mohammed. I am so glad that you came on and that you asked me some questions today, because, you know, every time I start up one of these streams, I'm always curious, is somebody actually going to come and, like, ask, or is it just going to be like me and one person that's just chatting? Sometimes that's how the members only ones go, and that's why I really need you guys to sign up, so that so that when I do these Q&A sessions with just members only, I get more of you guys asking questions. So let's see. Jim Grigg says, I have a VBA app in Access that verifies front-end version when user opens their copy of the front end and auto loads new version. That's a great idea. That's what I did in a lot of cases too. Is that I would compare versions of a local table, or it doesn't even have to be a table. It can be like a version number that you hard code in when the application first starts out. But usually there's some sort of version comparison of the front end to back end. And then what we would also do is we would like run a batch file that if there was an older version, we would actually have, sometimes we'd have a separate Access application that it would call out to. And that separate Access application would then like delete the one on the hard drive and go copy it from off of some sort of network drive and post it. There's some automation stuff that you could definitely do to handle that, but it's still not as simple because then you have to manage a separate application to do that. Also in my advanced series, I showed you guys how to do deployments. I kind of didn't go into a whole bunch of depth, but there is I forget what it's called, but there is a package. There's like an installation wizard that you can build and distribute your Access applications through that. So if you haven't checked that out, it's really cool because you can connect it to like a file that's hosted on a server, and it'll check version numbers and do the data. Like you tell it like, here's the URL to check the version number, and here's the URL to download the newest version. And it'll like just take care of everything for you. It even takes care of like the Access runtime for you. So if they need if they need to install the Access runtime, you can include that as part of the package that says, hey, you know, check to see if they have it. If they don't, go and download it and install it. So that's a pretty cool installer. It's really, really worth getting. It doesn't cost any money either. At least it didn't when I built the videos like 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. It was free back then. I imagine it's probably, if it's still even around, it's probably free. But there's also other installation wizards and stuff that you can package that kind of thing together. Okay. Access Blaster says, expound more on web applications for remote inventory. How would the reports be generated? Through Crystal? I hate Crystal. I hate Crystal. I really, Crystal reports can just, I hate them. I think that's pretty much the universal consensus about Crystal reports. Remote inventory. So, well, let's focus on the like generating reports. So you can, if you're working with a SQL server, you can just use SQL Server reporting services, right? And then actually C# has a reports library, a reporting library that you can kind of have a control that you can put on like a Win32 or WPF form or whatever, and it just like goes and extracts it. But typically when it comes to web applications, the great thing about web applications is that you're talking about like reports, and it's easy to think about reports as like this thing that I construct that has these preset widgets and stuff that I just kind of like throw in. I got graphs and charts, and I can organize my data to have a printout in a report format like we do in Access. It's got a header and a footer, and like all the detail can be tabled out and stuff. You could do the same thing in HTML, but it's just that you're working more with the raw bones of it, right? You can have, you basically just write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's going to pull data from out of the database and put it into your page. And your page becomes the report. There is no separate thing of a report. Like we construct this idea of a report because when we're working with applications that are CRUD, based upon this CRUD functionality like Access, right? We have this, I'm not CRUD functionality, sorry, RAD, Rapid Application Development. We typically think of like there's these different separate things to help us do XYZ task, right? Like there's these pre-built things to go do this thing. When you're working with web, understand that everything is the interface, and that includes the reporting. So you're really just going to build an HTML page that's going to be your report that you fill in with data. Like that's all that you're doing. It's the same exact thing. Like you're not having some separate thing for the form and some separate thing for the report and some separate thing for the query that's going to show the table data. It's all the same thing. It's all, you build HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's just that how do you want those elements to be laid out on the page is going to be different based upon the circumstance of what you want displayed on the page, right? That's the only difference. So there's no need for a report mechanism in web applications because you're just building HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's just you're modifying the layout. You just want it to appear this way, or this way, or this way, or this is going to be a form, and it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Or this is going to display a table, and it's still HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. Or if I want to have like some query data show up as a table, it's just an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript application. There's really no specific mechanism for a specific purpose. It's all the same thing. You just have to figure out how you want it laid out, right? I hope that makes sense. Okay. Jim says, great, let you know. Thank you. Awesome. Good. Mohammed Ferret says, for the mobile application, what do you prefer? For the mobile application, NativeScript is probably going to be where you want to go. I like Angular, so Angular NativeScript just kind of works together. Ionic is also pretty good for that. You could do, like, we teach Cordova. Also, if you're going to be doing C#, there's also Xamarin, and Xamarin uses WPF and MVVM. So WPF is very different. Like it's a very, so you're learning XAML is what you're really learning, which is an extensible markup language for applications. And it's not, although there are some similarities in just really what it looks like when it comes to HTML, HTML and XAML are really worlds apart in what they do and what their purposes are for. But the concept of tag-based XML, extensible markup language, is really the same, and you can have namespaces and attributes that point to certain elements and stuff. So knowing WPF, you can build a Xamarin application to do, your mobile application development, and Xamarin is a pretty amazing product to do that. So if you were going to be learning C#, I'd say you need to learn Xamarin. If you're planning on JavaScript, then you're probably going to want to go with something like NativeScript. Hamid Ferret says, can you make a series about using VBA on Excel? Probably not. I don't there's a ton of Excel VBA resources out there. I don't really see, I know it's a pretty popular thing. I just don't do anything in Excel. I have no reason to do anything in Excel because everything that you can do in Excel, I can do 10 times easier in Access and typically provide some sort of better interface for the users. Like every time somebody sends me an Excel spreadsheet, I go, ew, but it could be done in Access so much better. And I've just never really had any specific usefulness for Excel other than like if I'm just gonna like display some data in a column, or if somebody says, hey, can you take this table data and export it as an Excel spreadsheet for me? Like that'll happen occasionally, but I have absolutely no purpose for Excel other than just in those very rare circumstances, and I don't really use it very much. But the same concepts of VBA apply to Excel, right? The same exact concepts. Oh wow, it's hailing outside. The same type of variables and classes and functions and modules and like all of the same VBA concepts that you learn in Access are directly applicable to Excel. It's just that the objects that you're working with in Excel are a little bit different, okay? That's really the only difference. Like VBA, once you understand the VBA language, it can be applied to Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Like you can apply it to all of those different Access applications. Boy, it's really hailing right now. Jim Griggs asks, best starter language for a young person. Again, I'm going to go with C#. Like, I think it's, how young? How young would be helpful? I just think C# is just a great starting language all around for anybody, no matter how old or young you are. VBA is okay, but I think it is a bit of a hurdle going from VBA to any other language, and that's the same reason why I typically don't advocate for Python too much. Python is a very easy language to learn, but again, once you try to translate and hop into something else, it becomes a little bit more difficult. C#, I think, is just that perfect, you know, that perfect language that if you learn it, you can expand out to any other language, and it's a great thing to start with. The TCH. Great response. Thanks. You're welcome, and thank you so much for asking. I really, really appreciate it. This live stream reminds me of a coaching session I might do. I might be a good selling point. Oh, this live stream reminds me of a coaching session. It might be a good selling point. Yeah, I mean, that's why I say if you sign up as a member for $5 a month, you can get your direct Q&A sessions with me as a member. So I do occasionally do a Q&A session for members only, where members are the only ones that ask me questions. And, you know, if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. It's certainly a selling point for me. It's up to you guys if you want to sign up or not. Okay, the H says, yes, crystal reports are terrible. I always download the data into Excel and report that way. Yeah. You and like 1,000 other people that I can probably, like, just, if I posted up a question in Reddit, like, how many of you people like crystal reports? You'll get, like, from everyone. Jim Grigg says, agreed, Excel is not a database. Absolutely, it is not a database, no matter how many managers think it is, and send you those Excel spreadsheets and say, here's a database I made up. No, you did not. You, like, found that Excel has some fancier things than just columns and rows, and you thought you were building something cool, and you kind of can, right? You can kind of do some pretty cool stuff in Excel, but none of it is secure. None of it is really good user input stuff. Like, you can't really do, I mean, you could do forms. You could do some pretty interesting things with forms in Excel, but most people don't use it like that. Jim Gred says early 20s, so that must be the age of who you're talking. Yeah, C#. I would say C#. If your kid is looking for any sort of future, you know what? Let's go back to some of these articles. So I went over the Tech Crunch, and I know I'm going longer than I said I would, but that's okay. You guys are all friends. Okay, so going back to, okay, so this article is a Tech Republic. I like Tech Republic as a pretty good, they do some pretty good articles on programming. So I do definitely come to Tech Republic a lot for things. If you're looking to learn a second language, these are languages that complement your existing skills as a developer. There's actually a nice little video on here. I was going to play for you guys, but if you guys just go check out the video, or go check out the link, I'm going to put it in the description. Once I do post this video up on my main channel, I'll make sure that all the links that I came together, whether I get to them all or not, I'll go ahead and make sure it's in there. Okay, so where was I going to go? So if you write in library in C, for example, you always talk about memory managers. Yeah. So if you are a Java developer, Scala is a good place to go. Compatible with Java, thanks to running on the JVM. So JVM is the Java virtual machine, which is it's the equivalent of the .NET runtime, right? It's the thing that actually like takes your interpreted. So for those of you who don't understand or don't know, like C# or VB.NET actually gets interpreted into a intermediate language, into a Microsoft intermediate language. It used to be called Missile. Now it's just like just IL, I think. I think they got rid of the MS part. And it gets interpreted into this intermediate language, and then that language is actually what the runtime looks at, right? So the JavaScript runtime. So you compile your C# language or VB.NET into Missile. You compile it, which just converts it from one language to another. And that other language that it compiles it into is a closer to machine language, not quite machine language. Then you have this runtime that takes that language and actually does, like, interacts with the system, right? And that runtime is written in C and C++. And it's what's actually like taking your instructions and actually making them happen on the machine. Java, JVM is essentially that runtime equivalent for Java. It's like what's taking your interpreted language and like running it actually bare bones on there. So, okay. So Scala boasts useful aspects of functional programming languages and was designed to be a concise and feature-rich alternative to Java. Okay, so if you're a Java developer, Scala is pretty good. Also, Kotlin, if you're wanting to build Android applications. Swift, if you are an Objective-C. Obviously, if you are an Objective-C developer, I'm sorry for you. Most of you guys are probably not into this type of development, but Objective-C is for Apple devices. Swift is a more modern language, and it is much closer to things like C# and Java. It's in TypeScript. It's really very similar to TypeScript. Rust for C developers. Rust is designed to offer the fast performance of C and C++, but with safeguards to make it much harder for unexpected behavior to creep into software due to memory mismanagement. And that's really the thing. Like, when we're talking about these other languages like C#, VB.NET, Java, the runtimes are actually building in something called garbage collection, which is a memory management process. Like, when you declare something and you create it, it goes up into memory, but then what if you just like leave it there? In the C and C++ languages, if you created something and put it into memory, it was there until you told it explicitly that it was gone. Or even if you shut down the application in some cases, like, that memory was still allocated and it was like lost forever until you rebooted the whole computer. So Rust actually has some built-in mechanisms that prevent you from doing a lot of that stuff. Like C and C++, you can make some of those mistakes. C# and VB.NET and Java and Python, they all have these garbage collection processes that make sure that you never leave empty memory, like you never leave something in memory. But with C and C++, that was possible to do. Rust has some mechanisms that prevent it from happening, even though it's still just as low a level language as C and C++. So that's pretty cool. TypeScript for JavaScript developers. Again, gee, I wonder where I've heard that. Maybe like an hour ago on this very stream, maybe even an hour and a half ago. If you are going to learn JavaScript, I think it's just a necessity. You need to learn TypeScript. If you're going to learn JavaScript, learn TypeScript. And if you are a C# or Java developer or Python developer or just like any of those object-oriented languages, learning TypeScript is going to be so nice. It's going to simplify your life. And JavaScript will seem like, oh, well, this is a piece of cake. This is just another language that's almost identical to what I already know. So definitely need to learn TypeScript. Okay, next article. So this is, again, another one. Hey, want to learn the fastest growing programming language for 2019? Check out these two unstoppable newcomers. So JavaScript spinoff TypeScript. There it is again, TypeScript. If you're going to learn JavaScript, learn TypeScript. Java sibling Kotlin once again race up the Red Monk programming language rankings. So Red Monk, they're another, like, there's a bunch of these companies that are like keeping track of what the most popular language is so that they can be the first ones every year to say, want to learn a new language in 2019? Well, gotta go do this one. This is what our survey says. So we already know about TypeScript. Great. Kotlin. Well, TypeScript may be fast growing and relatively high placed. It's not climbing the ranks as rapidly as Kotlin. Kotlin is a modern alternative to Java that is easy to learn and received a huge boost in 2017 when Google designated it. Let me say it again. Kotlin is a modern alternative to Java that is easy to learn and use, which received a huge boost in 2017 when Google designated it an officially supported language for building Android applications. It has been described by a Netflix senior software engineer as offering some of the best features of other languages combined with interoperability with Java due to its ability to run on the Java virtual machine. I love it when they take like, hey, here's this engineer that we got from XYZ. I got from Oracle. I got from wherever. And like, they say this, and therefore it's true. Even though it's an opinion, right? It's like totally opinion, but because they got it from a software engineer from XYZ company, that lends credibility to it, and therefore it's fact, right? I love that stuff. Not that he's wrong. I'm not saying that he's wrong. I just find it funny that these articles like to do that kind of thing. Okay, so Kotlin stood out in 2019. Julia and Rust. Outside of these fast climbers, O'Grady also highlights relative newcomers Julia and Rust. I have never heard of Julia. I got to be honest. I've never heard of this language. I try to keep tabs on what's coming out. I've never heard of Julia. Anybody ever heard of this? I'm not. Wow. The Julia programming language is designed to combine the speed of C with the usability of Python. That's probably why, because it's kind of a derivative of Python. I gotcha. The mathematical prowess of MATLAB. Ooh. Wow. And the statistical chops of R, with the creators going as far as to describe it as a language for developers who want it all. I already got what I want. I got C#. In the 7 years since its launch, it's found favor as a language for building machine learning models and running supercomputer simulations. All right, cool. Julia. Okay, well, I'm gonna move on because I'm running out of time here. I'm gonna have to go pick up my wife here pretty soon. The 10 programming languages associated with the highest paying jobs all earn developers an average salary above $100,000. Okay, now this was the one that I was ultimately wanting to get to because I thought this was pretty good. I highlighted a bunch of sections of this. So this was the DICE 2019 Tech Salary Report, which shows pay for technology professionals only crept up to 0.6% in 2018. Base wages remain high with an annual average salary of $93,244. So just in technology professionals altogether, that's our average salary, $93,000. Boy, it's good to be in tech. The 10 programming languages associated with the highest paying jobs all earn developers an average salary of $100,000. Now, I imagine that's obviously not starting. That is senior also, and architect, and all that good stuff, all the higher end managers, blah, blah, blah. The top spot was held by Go. There's another mention of Golang. Perhaps little surprise given the fact that key open source tools that help orchestrate operations in modern data centers are based on Go, including the container deployment platform Docker and Google's Kubernetes container machine management software. That's right, I forgot about that. I forgot that Docker was based on Go. I had completely forgotten about that, and that totally makes more sense now why Go is becoming a more popular language. I mistakenly was tying it more directly to the fact that it was in Silicon Valley where that other article was being written about, and that's obviously where Google is. So I was mistakenly associating it more directly with Google, but the fact that it runs the Docker platform is a pretty important thing. Docker is, if you don't know what Docker is, I may have to do a primer on it sometime, but Docker is essentially a way of running a little mini virtual machine without having to allocate the resources specifically like you do with virtual machines. And they're self-contained systems, which means that you can actually, so the most popular way to use a Docker image is actually as a microservice, so that you can spin up, say, 5 of the same exact service running, and then you run your messages through a message queue system that it's like a database. A message queue system is like a database that's just holding instructions temporarily. So I used to do this with databases all the time. I would pass messages from one application to another through the database. I'd say like, hey, so-and-so logged in, and then them logging in would mean that other applications might be able to see that record in the database. And based upon that, they would do some sort of process. Well, that's exactly what a message queue system does. And when you start dealing with Docker and Kubernetes, what you're able to do is spin up multiple of the same exact service, and they're all watching for some sort of message to come from this message queue system. And the message queue system, once there's a message on there, one of those services, the first one to hit it, picks it up and runs with it, takes that message down out of the queue, right, and goes and runs with it. And this is how you have some asynchronous processing. Because you can have one application send a message, and if it doesn't matter if it gets a response back, right? Sometimes you have an application that doesn't really require a response. You just say like, here's some data, go do something with it, right? And then some other process can go pick up that information and do whatever with it. That's what microservices are trying to do. And when you have a Docker, which is like all these little tiny microservices all running in their own separate split up environments, and then anytime one of those environments fails, like have you ever had an application that's running on a critical system and then that server shuts down? Well, with Docker and Kubernetes, it's like, since there's all these little mini self-contained things, as soon as one fails, it will shut it down and restart a new one in its place. And you can have redundant services. So Docker is really, really growing as a resource for all of these different companies to have redundancy, 100% uptime, to handle processes more asynchronously so the customers don't have to wait on the process to complete. Docker, in combination with Kubernetes and microservices, has really revolutionized our industry, but it's really high-level stuff, right? It's going beyond just our typical stuff, things that we think about as developers. But Go is what basically handles all that. So that's one of the main reasons why Golang is becoming so popular. I wish I had thought of that when I was reading the other article. DevOps engineer was the 5th highest earning tech job by title, offering an annual salary of $11,683, which, by the way, coincides with Go, because as I mentioned before, Golang is like one of those really big DevOps languages. It's one that developers, engineers who are managing things on the network, including Kubernetes and Docker, right? We're talking about pipelines and keeping up the applications, keeping the systems going that the business relies upon and depends upon. You have certain scripts that need to run and complete, and Golang is one of those scripts, just like VBScript might be one of those things that you do, or PowerShell. So knowing Golang makes sense because DevOps engineers are becoming one of the highest paid positions. So yeah, similarly, the most highly paid skills were related to deploying and managing the building blocks of big data storage and analytics, such as the data streaming platform Apache Kafka, cloud-based NoSQL-related database Amazon DynamoDB, and the cloud-based data warehouse Amazon Redshift. So they're just mentioning Amazon, but there's also like a Google Cloud has this. MongoDB has Atlas, which you can do. There's Azure has their own one. There's a lot of cloud-based data storage warehouse systems out there, so not a surprise. This is interesting. Perl still seems to be in demand, which is a programming language back in the 80s. I remember I didn't learn Perl, but I knew about it and I know what it does. It eventually became PHP in a way, like PHP kind of derived from it. But interesting that Perl still seems to be in demand. That's really one of the surprises, because we've moved well beyond the capabilities of Perl, but it's interesting it's still there. So Node.js JavaScript and Enterprise Java. So JavaScript, Java, Golang, and it's interesting because all these different languages. So I mentioned way earlier. Highest paid programming and scripting languages. I'd mentioned how like C# is almost always somewhere in here, and there it is, number 10, but nobody ever mentions it, right? It's like C# is one of those enterprise languages very similar to Java. It's kind of a little bit more specialized than Java, and many enterprises run on C#. There's a lot of .NET jobs out there, so I think that C# is a great language because you can end up getting one of these really nice, highly paid salary positions. And then it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to things like TypeScript and JavaScript with Node.js. And then Golang is not too different. I'm surprised. I mean, Python is 7th here. That's a bit lower than I would have expected it, but I guess we're talking about highest paid. So Python is becoming more machine language stuff. Highest paid skills for tech workers in 2018. So these are going to be skills, more specific rather than languages. So there's Kafka, Amazon DynamoDB, Redshift, Cassandra, which is a Microsoft offering, Elasticsearch, RabbitMQ. That's interesting. That's the message queue system that I was talking about, where you can pass messages back and forth between services. RabbitMQ is one of those that can do that. You can pass those messages. MapReduce, platform as a service. That's just kind of like what we're all doing nowadays. HANA and Cloudera. Okay. I've never heard of Cloudera or HANA. I should probably look into those. Okay. So highest paid tech jobs by title, tech management. So CEO, CIO, CTO, VP director, right? Systems architect, Tech management, strategist or architect, right? So it's kind of closely similar to systems architect. Product manager. I'm surprised they said product manager instead of product owner. Little bit of a thing there. DevOps engineer is growing. So it's interesting that they're below some of these other ones, but okay. Software engineer. So here's where you're starting to get into your typical software application development. Hardware engineer. Interesting. Project manager. What's the difference between, well, okay, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, product. Yeah, there's obviously different project managers. Managers are basically going to be assigned for managing the expansion of something. And then product managers are basically somebody who is in charge of an entire product, right? Not just one sprint of it. By the way, we got a new member, HRU Bricks. Thank you so much for deciding to join up and be a member on Programming Made Easy. I really appreciate it. Once again, if you're interested, if you are a member, it's just $5 a month. You get 10% off in our Teespring store. So if you buy like 2 things or maybe even 1 thing, depends on what you buy, it already pays for itself right there. So you should go definitely do that. And then also you get direct access to me. You can fill out a form. You fill out that form and you actually ask me a question directly and send me your email and I will respond directly to you. And that's a little bit better than trying to do the communication system of just commenting on a video because then we have to like have some sort of back and forth and it just starts filling up the comments. And typically that's not a very good scenario. And I can't really do like screen sharing or anything with you in the comments section of a YouTube video. So if it gets to that point, then we can do that. Also, you get your name mentioned in the end of any video that I record during the time that you are a member. So if I record any videos during that time, and I remember, because I did have a couple that I forgot, but I still mentioned them in the description, but I try to make sure that I get you mentioned at the end of every video that I record for that time that you are a member. So I really, really appreciate all of you guys who do sign up. Thank you so much again, HRU Bricks. I'm interested. I don't think that's your name, right? That's probably your company name or something. But good to have you aboard. Thank you so much for joining up. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so Access Blaster says, the future of Access and SharePoint, will Microsoft continue to support them? Yes. Yes, I believe so. I've kind of changed positions on this, and that probably means that they're both doomed. But I used to think, well, first of all, they're 2 separate things. SharePoint, I am not a fan of. There's some good things about it, like lists and being able to fill out forms and maintain data in a bit of a, like, it's really too simple of a way, right? There's some good things, being able to store, you know, like Word documents and Excel spreadsheets and share that stuff with your team and, you know, do calendar items and stuff like that. Like it's got some great concepts, but I think it's so outdated at this point. There's really not much that you can do on SharePoint that's going to be extra special that you couldn't do on like Google Drive, right? For a lot cheaper. And the administration aspect of SharePoint has always been absolutely abysmal. SharePoint management is just a whole other, it really is a separate job. Like you need a SharePoint administrator to understand how to even use the thing and specialize in it to even provide any sort of value to the company. I've never been a fan of SharePoint. I just have never been a fan. The future of Access is a little bit different. I think that I'm always worried about Access. I'm always worried that it's not going to stick around because it always seems like there's some sort of competing technology that's coming out. But you know what consistently happens is that those other technologies just, they don't happen, right? They never take off like Access has. Access's ease of use for the quote-unquote power user, like the adoption of it from the perspective of a power user is pretty good. And it's pretty simple to work with. You know, I got a bunch of you guys that I'm sure every single one of you guys at some point is like, I can't do any programming. That stuff is too complicated. Oh, let me click on this video for Access. Oh my God, I know how to do an Access video, or I know how to do Access. Like, it's like, you know, you can go from knowing absolutely nothing to understanding the entire structure of an application and building something from top to bottom inside of Access. You can't really do that in too many places, right? The other thing is the accessibility of data with Access. Like being able to just query 20 sources of data at once. You can't do that anywhere else. Like you just can't. You can probably do some linked SQL servers in like SQL, do SQL Server link server, but like Access has this crazy ability to connect to any type of data source and like bring it all together and get your data and piece out the information you need. Like there's no other platform I know of that can do that. And until somebody can come up with a great replacement, which I think like LibreOffice has like their, what's it called? Base, right? They have something called Base, which is supposed to be a competitor to Access. I'm kind of looking into it a little bit, but I don't really have too much time. But until there's like a great alternative, heck, even like Google doesn't really have a great alternative to Access. Like they got Word documents and PowerPoint, they got slides, they got their version of a Word document, they got their version of an Excel spreadsheet, but they don't have their version of an Access database. So like, until somebody comes along with a superior product, I think Access is here to stay. I keep saying the best thing that Microsoft could ever do is basically rebuild Access as part with the .NET framework. Like just if they did that, they would continue the legacy of Access into the future, where people could design these simple applications. You could have your power user, your managers, figure out a way to build something very simple with Access and then hand it over to a developer who can expand upon it. Right now, you can't really do that. It's like the only significant downfall of Access is that you cannot take an Access database and easily translate it into .NET or build it as a web application, right? Which if you could move it to .NET, you could build it as a web application. That's like the biggest problem with Access. And if they just took the time to dedicate to like putting all of those objects that we work with in Access and making them .NET applications instead, or .NET products instead of the COM objects, like they'd solve so many problems. Like the longevity of Access would never be in doubt at that point. It would just continue to grow on and be a significant contributor to the community. Anyway, okay, moving on. Jim Craig says, so C and VBA a good starter. Yeah, so very specifically here, C#. There's C, there's C++, and there's C#. Very different languages, all three of them. They have some similarities, but they're all vastly different and serve different purposes. Although C and C++ are similar, like C++ is just C, like a little bit expanded, a few extra things that are added on top of C. But C# is like totally different. So I'm saying C# and VBA. Okay, so C#, not just C. The H says, I will be signing up when I get home for sure, though my other YouTube log on HRU bricks. Oh, okay. So you're the H. I gotcha. HRU, the H. I gotcha. I currently use Scratch, Lego Mindstorm, Arduino, Excel, and Access. Thus, it is time to get serious. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Scratch, Lego Mindstorm. Lego Mindstorm. Is that like a 3D builder? I'm curious. I've never heard of Lego Mindstorm. That's interesting. Jim says, I need to sign off. What is your live schedule? Great session. I will be back. I don't have a live schedule. It's whenever I get a chance. Mostly that's because of my wife. Honestly, she's not home right now. She's working. And I can really only do live sessions when she is out because she prefers that when I'm not working, I'm spending time with her, and I can't blame her. I'm a pretty awesome person. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so yeah, I don't really have a schedule. I would love to like start up one, and I may try to come up with something, but yeah. You really just kind of have to pay attention. I try to announce it if I know that I'm going to have time to do one of these. I try to announce it. I put it up on Facebook. I post it up in the comments or the community section of the page, and hopefully you guys can see the alerts and stuff. Don't forget to hit that, hit the alarm button. If you're going to subscribe, don't forget to hit that alarm button because that will give you the notifications when I go live. So definitely do that. It is my channel name My name is Henry. Oh, hi Henry. thank you for signing up. I really appreciate it. SharePoint is another thorn in my side at work along with Crystal Reports. It started up on my laptop but cannot search the DB and it cannot figure out why. Yeah. SharePoint's abysmal. I like Microsoft is still propping this thing up and I just don't understand it. SharePoint has just never really been that great. Nothing but Stardust says, my coworkers think SharePoint is just a glorified shared drive. Like most companies, that is what it is. Even though it could do a ton more capabilities, right? Even though SharePoint can have like share your calendars and, you know, do data entry with it. And you can even tie like the whole lists thing is really just like a table. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with SharePoint, but almost inevitably, all anybody does with SharePoint is just use it as a shared drive for their files. Like here's a Word document. You can have like a workflow on it, right? You can have a whole approval process of like, here's like a quote that needs to go through like 5 people to get approved or something like that. You can have a whole workflow in SharePoint and nobody uses it for it, right? It's just like post something up. Hey, go take a look at this. I've never walked into a company that's had SharePoint. I walked into some companies, I've walked into my fair share of companies that had SharePoint installed. Not a single one of them ever used it for what I think its actual true purpose was, which was more or less what Teams is now, right? Microsoft Team, where you just like have this ability to communicate and continuously like share ideas and post up your calendars and blah. Like nobody ever uses it to its full potential. They just use it as, like you said, like a shared storage. Like that's what it is. My Lego Mindstorms seems to be robot kits. Oh, that's great. You know what? Oh, okay. I'm going to make a total plug. So not for me, for somebody else. So about 2 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said, I have no understanding why anybody on this earth would ever watch somebody play video games. Who does that? Like every once in a while, I'll watch like a Vanoss gaming clip on YouTube because he's really funny. Like he does some hilarious things. But even then it kind of gets old and boring. Like who watches somebody play video games? I'd rather play the video game. I would never like go watch someone. So this whole idea of Twitch, right? Twitch TV, like 2 years ago was like, oh my God, who's doing this? Who's watching this? Like, why is this even a thing? But I found myself going there for, I don't remember. I think it was, I came across a YouTube video of this. I remember how it happened. Okay, so I watched a couple of like video commentaries because I was playing Call of Duty occasionally and I was getting like little tips and tricks from a guy named Drifter. So I was watching Drifter and he started playing this game called PUBG, which I'm sure you guys have probably heard. Well, maybe some of you have. So PUBG, Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, right? And it really defined this new genre of video game that we call the Battle Royale, right? So Fortnite is based upon this concept. Now it's in everything. Like Battlefield 5 has a version of this. Black Ops has a version of this. H1Z1 was actually really kind of the original of this, but like Player Unknown's Battlegrounds really like solidified the genre. Anyway, so I saw Drifter play this game and I thought, oh, it's kind of interesting. And then I started to like YouTubing stuff and I came across this one guy named WTF Moses, who he has like this really boomy voice like this. So what you guys are going to want to do is go like over here. Kind of interesting guy from Canada. But he started like playing with this other guy named Choco Taco. So Choco Taco, I started listening to him and I was like, this guy is the most laid back, relaxed gamer I think I've ever seen. Just so like if you think of a typical gamer, even me, like rage quitting, right? Like, oh, I hate this game, throw my controller across the room, right? So Choco Taco is the exact opposite of that and is so amazing to watch. He's a really skilled player, not like the top, But one of the things that I loved about that I really like about Choco Taco is his ability to assess the situation and make solid decisions on the fly. Like the epitome of a tactician. He knows tactically what to do in almost every case. And minds that work like that are so rare, I think, that, you know, the guys that can just think things up like that and just be able to assess the situation and immediately know exactly what to do. Those are the kinds of minds that are just amazing to watch. And when I started watching Choco Taco, it didn't even matter what game he was playing at that point. I just love watching his strategy and his laid back attitude. I mean, he's got like the jazz music he plays when he's waiting for cues up, and he'll talk with chat and just be like, "Oh, hey, thanks guys." And just like his total attitude and demeanor is a personality that is very alluring, right? It has less to do with the video game, and it has so much more to do about personality. Well, so Choco Taco, and the reason why I came to this was because before he became a full-time online streamer, his job was teaching kids teaching kids about engineering using Legos. How awesome of a job was that, right? Like, I'm sure he obviously put it away, and he was like, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. But still, it's like teaching kids about engineering using Legos. That was his job. So I saw this thing about Mindstorm that you guys were posting up. I thought that's great. It just reminded me of Choco Taco, and I'm like, oh, I gotta talk about this guy. So if you guys ever get a chance, I strongly encourage you guys, Twitch TV. I know if you like never imagined yourself watching somebody play video games, I totally get it, because I was in that spot 2 years ago. I have been a member of his. I have subscribed to his. I pay him every month, probably more than my wife would like me to admit to. But I subscribe to his channel, and like he is just, I have him on in the background. He's so relaxed and soothing. When I'm working, he's just kind of like that easy, calming presence for me. And I think that is like the universal thing that's said about him. So if you guys want to check it out, I really encourage you, just go to Twitch TV, twitch.tv/Choco Taco, CHOCOTACO, Choco Taco. Trust me, like you'll never see another gamer like him. He's just the most relaxed. Everything is fine. Good games, you know. The attitude I wish I could emulate. Cricket says, my company uses SharePoint for an SOP workflow, and it breaks every Monday when any patches come in. Yep. I don't know why anybody would be on SharePoint anymore these days, other than just legacy, right? It's like we've all grown accustomed to doing it this way, so we do it. Henry, HRU Brick says, Mindstorm is a programmable brick with sensor inputs and motor outputs that uses a visual block programming editor or language. It is a great introduction to programming basics. Yeah, but for more mechanical stuff, yeah. That sounds really cool. Like, that would be really good for if you're getting into robotics, wouldn't it? That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, guys. It is like way past when I planned on ending this stream, and my wife is about to text me any minute now saying that she's closing up at work. So I unfortunately have to go, but I really appreciate you guys sticking around. Love you new members. I really got to say, like, Jim and Henry, thank you so much for signing up. I really am so glad to have you guys aboard. And again, if there's anything that you guys want as members, something that you guys would like to have more, let me know. And if it's something that I can do, I'll do it. Like, I want to try to cater to you guys as much as I can. Make it if you guys are spending money on just showing up and watching my videos and talking to me, I want to make sure that it's worthwhile to you. So whatever you guys want, just let me know. And if it's something I can do, if it's something I can put together, I will definitely do it. And I really do want to also say, so I'm really trying to do this store thing. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know if I'm going to keep it up. Depends on how many people buy stuff. But I thought one of the great things that I could do for you guys that are members is just, give you 10% off on everything that's in there. I don't know if I can cut it back anymore. I'll have to do some evaluation. For my members, I might cut it back. If I can do it at 20%, I might go and, reevaluate the code that we do and see if I can cut it back I'll have to do some math on that to make sure that it doesn't like cost me money by giving you guys extra percentage off. But thank you so much for joining up, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to, again, hit that little bell button so that you guys get notified whenever I do one of these things. Because, again, I don't know when I'm going to do them. It all just depends upon when my wife will let me. Love you, babe. You're probably going to go back and watch this video later. Anyway, so thank you again so much for all of your guys' support. I really appreciate it. I guess as one last question I'm going to ask you guys before I go is if you guys can let me know in the channel, like, what are your favorite videos that I do? Like, what are the things that you guys really appreciate that I do? Is it the in my opinion videos where I talk about some sort of technical topic? You guys ask me a question and I answer it, kind of like what I do in these Q&A sessions, but you know, more bite-sized one videos. Or do you like the I've been recently doing like covering news articles like I do for you guys also in this video, where I find some news article and I discuss it a little bit more in depth. And then there's also kind of this new format that I'm also testing out, which I did for the Article 11 and Article 13, which was to just kind of, you know, take a topic and kind of explore it or explain it, you know, in a bit more, of a polished style, although the video wasn't too terrific of me with the green screen, kind of failing me there. But, you know, taking like an article or a couple articles and talking and exploring a subject and kind of giving like my in-depth opinion about it. You know, what's that? Also, if you're more interested in the tutorials, what kind of languages are you interested in learning? What are you interested in the JavaScript stuff? Are you interested in HTML and CSS? Are you interested in React and Angular? Would you like me to do more C#? Would you like me to teach Java? Would you like me to do Python? Would you like, you know, I'm interested to hear what you guys would like more of on the channel for content. I'll be honest with you, like the videos where I just kind of cover news articles or give my opinion about something, those are so easy for me to make that's kind of why the content is shifted a little bit that way. It's because I can kind of just, you know, pop those things out in an hour or so. Whereas the full-fledged tutorial videos, they take a lot more planning, they take a lot more effort, they take a lot more editing. It's just, overall, it's a lot more difficult to put that kind of content together. But if it's what you guys like and it's what keeps bringing you guys back and it's what makes you guys want to be members, then that's what I'm going to start trying to deliver on. So let me know. I really appreciate all your guys' feedback, and thank you so much for sticking around and watching. I just now received the text message from my wife. She's ready for me to go pick her up. So I have got to go. Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys later.